podcast where we get our site staff together to talk about our favorite genre of video games. I'm your host. My name is Brian Vitale. Joining me, I've got Josh Torres,
Hi, hello.
I've got Chao Min Wu,
How's it going?
and joining us once again, back from his escapades at Summer Game Fest, we have James Galizio.
Hey, folks.
Adam is around, but was having some hardware issues. He might be able to jump on the podcast later, but we are not sure. That is still developing. But we're going to proceed here. We're going to be talking about James's time over at Summer Game Fest. We're happy to have him back. If you listened to the podcast last week, me, Josh, and Chow kind of held down the fort. It was about halfway through the proceedings. We tried to cover as much news as we could prior to like the PC gaming show and the Xbox showcase. We record this podcast on Saturdays. So we were able to talk about the stage event from Jeff Keighley and a few of the things at like Guerrilla Collective, some of the indie shows. So we're going to kind of wrap around again this week to talk about some of the things that were shown at Xbox and at PC Gaming. And then, of course, also spend some time just talking to James about his time over at Summer Games Fest on the floor, talking to some old friends of ours, friends of the site, what he was able to demo and see. So hopefully we'll get Adam on site on the podcast also to talk about those, but if not, we'll leave that for next week when he has his computer up and running. But with that said, we have a lot of news to cover, so this will be likely a very news-focused podcast. Before we get too far, I will say that the big release of this week is Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance. That was a review and guide effort helmed by Adam. So without any further ado, we're going to hand it off over to James. Before we go into any individual news item, just to talk about your experience at Summer Games Fest. It's kind of the new normal. Now that we're kind of on the downswing of the pandemic, E3 is, truly gone. This is kind of the summer thing now. So Summer Games Fest isn't new, but it's kind of been, it's established. It's kind of got its feet under it. How was your time over? Obviously, you're local to LA, so you didn't have to travel in, but Summer Games Fest might, as an actual media participant, might be a little bit new to you. So just tell us about your time on the show floor, what you're able to see, who you're able to speak to, and just kind of your experience over the last weekend.
Yeah, so I actually did Summer Game Fest last year for the site solo.
Okay.
So not too much changed this year. It was bigger. It was very clear. A lot more people got invited. A lot more companies were involved with it. It was also an extra day longer. So it definitely feels like Jeff Keighley is trying to like keep pushing it bigger and bigger each year. He still really likes that one spot, which is kind of like it's mostly outdoors. It's like a block basically rented out for the weekend where a bunch of companies are set up and you just play a bunch of games. So we saw Sega Atlas, Bandai Namco, uh, Capcom. We also saw a bunch of indie studios. We saw EA and Ubisoft wasn't part of SGF, but they had their own thing concurrently halfway across town, which annoyed everyone because you would have to take an Uber in between appointments if you had anything that you were going to see at Ubisoft. And obviously, like Assassin's Creed is pretty major, so saw hands off for that. And then there was Star Wars Outlaws, which we didn't bother with an appointment for that one. And apparently, it's been considerably more mixed from what people saw. So
Yeah, following up on your statement of like it being a little bit more spread out. Like I heard a lot of like common sentiments too, like where last year's SGF it seemed to be more close knit in terms of proximity, but then like in this year's SGF there's just like a lot more appointments held in like separate hotels that were like at the other side of town that really annoyed people. Where it's like we're like there were just like different like appointments in like every like in different hotels at like different parts of town that like it just people couldn't like feasibly walk there. They'd have to like take an Uber there more often than not.
yeah, yeah, it's not too bad because the Ubers are getting reimbursed, but definitely was annoying whenever it
Mhm.
happened. That was also the main reason why we didn't do the actual SGF showcase because it was literally the opposite side of town.
Oh
It's like,
wow.
okay, so it's going to be like $35 to get there and then surge pricing when you
Right.
try and leave and it's like, no, I think we're good. I think we're
Yeah,
good.
I think they have to think about reining that in when it comes to like logistics of that event. Like just thinking about like, okay, we need to
But
organize this in a way that makes
yeah.
sense for like at least commute, right?
Yeah, and it's like I would say, oh, give people Uber vouchers, but the thing is that for the showcase specifically, that's way too many people, way too many Uber vouchers, knowing how that would happen, knowing how that would happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I talked about SGF last year, and not too much has changed. Not too much has
Okay.
changed. Like I said, just bigger. Funnily enough, the layout was pretty similar this time. Like one main difference is that there was one section that Warner Brothers was in, showing off Mortal Kombat, and like Bandai Namco took that space this time instead, and then Capcom took the space that Bandai Namco was using,
Okay.
which it seems like the space that Capcom was in this time is the main attraction, so to
Mm,
speak, because it's connected to like a theater setup, which is where they basically did the hands-off like gameplay playthrough for a hunt in Monster Hunter Wilds. So I'll talk about that later. But it's
mhm.
like last year they did a similar thing with Armored Core 6. So it seems like that's the main area
Yeah, I
for
see.
like
Do you
the
think that's just like the premier area of
yeah.
like just going forward of like, hey, this is the main attraction of this event?
Yes, yes. And I
Okay.
mean, obviously Monster Hunter is, considering it was
Yeah.
like the final like thing shown at both the Game Awards and Summer Game Fest, and for good reason. I mean, it's wild to think, funny about that, but it's crazy to think that Monster Hunter is just like one of the biggest like games in the world. Like it was always huge in Japan, but just especially
Yeah.
seeing how much focus they're putting on Wilds, and if it wasn't for GTA 5, Monster Hunter Wilds would probably be the best selling game next year.
Yeah, quite possibly. Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, we played too much stuff, way too much stuff.
Yeah.
I played
Just
I
yeah,
put
give us the highlights of like like your first like thing takeaway right now. Like what is the game that you're thinking of when you think back on the event?
Phantom Blade Zero.
Oh,
S
yeah.
Game were there. They had a setup with 4 demo stations for Phantom Blade Zero, and that was a game I was interested in because it was that one action RPG that had that one trailer at a PlayStation showcase, not showcase.
State of
What's
play.
the state of play that was super over animated and it looked good, but pretty much everyone I saw was like, "Yeah, it looks good, but I don't know how it's gonna play." It plays really, really good, really, really
Gotcha.
good.
That's good to hear. Like I
Yeah.
saw some of the demo footage. I'm kind of surprised this is kind of real gameplay because it like just seeing that game without HUD, you're kind of on the edge of like, is this real gameplay or not? And then once you actually see a HUD and like see like the actual player moving, it's like, oh, this is
Yeah.
actually just a game.
But yeah, Phantom Blade Zero was good. That was one of the shorter demos, but it's definitely, I think that and Kunitsu-Gami would be my game of the shows for stuff that was playable. Though Monster Hunter Wilds, even like hands off, oh man, oh man. I've said it before. I have over 1,000 hours in World, and
Mhm.
definitely gonna be well, maybe not 1,000 hours in Wilds because I won't have to rebuy it on PC after
Yeah.
PlayStation, but I'm not ruling it out, let's say.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of like the impressions, saw some gameplay, and like just saw like but like cliff notes of like people took away from it. It looks to be an interesting big evolution. That's
Yeah.
just like especially like as you and me, like we've played through a lot of Monster Hunters. It's like just seeing them go through like
Yeah, the
just
more
break away from like the standard like going on a mission and then coming back to
yeah.
a village and then like just shaking that up. And it's like, no, this is all seamless. Like you're on the go. You can like make your own camps, temporary camps. Like that's like it just seems mind boggling the more I
It
think about like the way
the
that they've
the best way I
changed the
can describe
structure.
yeah, the best way I can describe it, if I had to just use one
Mhm,
sentence to
mhm.
kind of sum up the vibes I'm getting from Wilds is, what if Monster Hunter World was expanded and also was a bit of Xenoblade?
Oh,
Huh.
Because like the zones themselves are bigger and they're way more reactive. There's like the season system back.
mm,
There's the weather system. Obviously, there's the day night cycle that was already there. And there's like different monsters that show up depending on the season, depending on the time of day, depending on the weather, that sort of thing.
yeah,
And it's like you have all the endemic life from like World. And basically because the everything's just as reactive as World, maybe a bit more, like again, it's too early to say for sure. But the fact that the scope has been expanded out that way and the size of the locations and the fact that there's like monsters just prowling around in packs, and some of them might be stronger than others. It's like you take a step back and you think about it, it's like this is Monster Hunter, but with a bit of Xenoblade structure in it, which is really fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds crazy. Like, because you know, when you and me talk about like a game like Xenoblade X, we always talk about like how the world feels alive, how it feels very reactive. You see monsters like fighting amongst each other. It's a very vibrant world. You just
Yep.
even though it's like confined to the Wii U's hardware limitations, they did so much to stretch that
Yep.
hardware's capabilities. And I think, you know, Wilds is gonna push that hardware in different ways, but in a way that, like, you know, will feel make that world feel more alive and convincing. And I'm very excited to hear that, like, it borrows a little bit of DNA and like philosophy from Xenoblade. That's really, yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm super excited. Pretty much I've been pretty open about the fact that even though I did enjoy Rise, I liked what World
Mhm.
was going for more with the more immersive stuff
Oh
and like
yeah.
the elements at play, because as Monster Hunter has gone on, it's lost a lot of that preparation aspect of it, but in the same sense, World kind of like counterbalanced things with all the stuff you can find in the environment, the endemic life, and also like just discovering like new ingredients for like it felt like even though like the preparation was de-emphasized, it was like it wasn't like axed entirely. It was just like rearranged where those systems were, where those mechanics were, and it felt really good. So seeing them very explicitly kind of follow up on that and be like, okay, let's see if we can get a more open environment. And the exact like verbiage they used is that the areas in wilds are like over 2 times as large as the ones in world. So that should give you an impression like how
Yeah, I'm
big
really
those are.
interested in like what like mid to late game hunts look like in Wilds in terms of like scope and like like how far around the map are these fights gonna like take place, because there's like a an aspect of like luring monsters like in like maybe making them like break away from packs, for example, to make them chase you.
Oh
And then
yeah,
now you
that was exactly the thing they did in the
Mhm.
gameplay demo. Is
Yeah.
they had like this alpha, and they were trying to drag it away from the rest of its pack. So they
Mhm.
were like trying to like maneuver so that the weaker ones would get caught in some like bramble, so they wouldn't be able to move as quickly. And you just basically dragging them away and then like pelting them with like go through a cave, just pelting him with rocks and like just using everything to your advantage like you would in world until you just like take it out. Like, and it's like they've really like the thing they wanted to showcase is they had that alpha basically go through the whole map and just dragging every other
Wow.
monster into it, being like, hey, let's see if we can
Yeah,
get
we
these guys to fight. Let's see if we can get
yeah,
these guys to fight. And I
me
and
and
like
Josh kind of covered this a little bit, like because just for some from some framing, we were able to talk about Phantom Blade Zero and Monster Hunter Wilds a little bit last podcast because those were both shown on the Friday show floor, and we kind of talked about how it's surmised or the way that their press release was worded about luring from packs, how the new design of the zones in the open world or semi-open world is going to be impacted by that rather than the designated biomes of the of Ryzen world. So it's cool to kind of hear you speak with some more direct evidence to that philosophy compared to us trying to glean from the trailer last week. So
Yeah.
yeah,
it's cool to see it sync up like
Yeah.
that.
It's also cool to see, like, you know, I think about like what mid to late game hunts will look like in WoW is also like that tension of like, because you can make your the camps that you can construct, like temporary camps. Those are camps that like monsters can actually like break into and like
yep,
destroy. And like, oh, that sounds really cool. That like it's like in Resident Evil when you're like when you're in like in a safe room, but then there's like some like false safe rooms where like say like Nemesis or the one from Mr. X can like break into in remake, and it's like, oh, that's not a safe room at all. You know, it's like you just feel like that like tension and violation of like, I thought this was like a place where monsters couldn't get into. You know, what are you doing here? You know?
yeah.
And that's
And I
really
do
that's really awesome.
And I do love how the cooking system seems to have been completely changed. It seems like
Mm,
you'll probably still be able to get meals at like the like at like villages and whatnot. But
yeah.
two things neat about villages. One, so the villages are in the biomes now. So I'm assuming that every like map is going to have a village that's like central to it. which is
Okay.
fascinating.
All right. Okay.
And because of that, so let's say I don't know the exact name of the area that they've showcased so far, the like kind of savanna, like desert, like hybrid area.
Yeah.
Uh, when a sandstorm starts up, the people in the village start reacting. So like when it's sunny and there's like no issues, there's no sandstorm coming, it's a bustling city. But then when the sandstorm starts up, you see people basically like hunkering down, making their preparations, except for like the key like shopkeepers and whatnot. Because it's like, well, a sandstorm's gonna hit, you need to get into shelter, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But also, yeah, so the cooking stuff, I'm assuming, I could be wrong, I'm assuming you can still cook stuff in towns and whatnot, but also you can cook stuff when you're out and about, but you have to supply the ingredients. And one example they gave is, here's this cheesemonger in this village. You can buy cheese from her. Each of them has a specific like buff attached to it or a specific attributes that'll help. And you literally can just like out in the field combine your ingredients and cook on the fly. So
Nice. Yeah, I heard people were talking about like how super detailed the food was and everything,
yep.
and just like they went even harder on the food detail. It's like, all right, Capcom.
It's kind of like Dragon's Dogma 2, only now it actually shows like the player character like taking a bite out of the food.
It's so funny. Yeah, and joining us on the podcast, Adam Vitali, thank you for you were able to go overcome your technical hardware.
Yeah, minor hardware issue at the beginning of the podcast, but I'm good now. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Is there anything else you want to say about Wilds? I know that I probably got most of it, but
yeah. The only Monster Hunter games I've played are stories, because I'm a true RPG nerd. Like turn-based, I'm in. I'm joking, but
yeah. Do you think I'm off base with the Xenoblade comparison?
Or? Oh no, not at all. It's like I have not played World or Rise, but I've watched you and Brian and others play it a lot, and it's like obviously bigger, and the zones don't feel like a constrained. I know that not that World feels constrained, but it's very clearly like I don't know where the end of the I don't know where the boundary is.
It's delineated.
Yeah.
It's like this is the forest biome. This is the desert biome. Well, I guess there's a little bit of that in Wild, based on the way that they're describing the first region. But it's more
so in the demo that we saw, it wasn't playable. They basically promised it's going to be first playable at Gamescom, I think. But they basically were fighting this monster. I forget the name of the monster, but they kind of lead it all over the place. Like it's definitely not just fighting it in like one battle arena. They're kind of fighting it, all across this giant zone, and they're leading it into rocks and into other monsters and whirlpools and thunderstorms. And it was pretty big.
That's cool. Yep.
Yeah.
So for perspective change, since you're here, Adam, you went to SGF as well. You flew out there. Just tell us a little bit about your journey there and what you thought about your time at SGF.
Yeah, so this is actually this is kind of late now, but I actually have commented on going to SGF to a few people online here, and some of them were like, I didn't realize that SGF was like a thing that people went to. They just thought it was just a series of streams or like like Keighley's concert or not concert, like auditorium presentation.
Well, he does record at a concert often.
Yeah, he does do concerts sometimes. I meant like auditorium, but like no, there is literally like a show floor. It's definitely like much more quaint than E3, which is in the convention center. This is just kind of in a little like market square, but it's a place that a lot of developers and media and influencers and everyone just kind of meet in a little kind of a little square block of LA, where a lot of booths are set up and there's a couple of theaters and presentations and whatnot. Definitely no public. There's no public access to this yet, which I actually think is really nice. But yeah, I mean, it's let me just get real for a second here.
Okay.
Like one of the best parts about Summer Games Fest is like a lot of people who work in this field only know people through like emails or like Discord or online interactions. There's a lot of people at these different publishers, PR people or at these PR agencies that I have known, quote, for like years, if not more than a decade, but have never met. So it's always nice to like actually meet in person and say like,
Yeah, put a
see
face to
someone face to
yeah.
face,
Yep.
some embracing even, and it's just
Mhm.
fun and it's great. It's
Yeah.
it's invigorating. But
Mhm.
anyways, the I'm trying to think. So we talked about Monster Hunter. A lot of people really liked, or Kunitsu-Gami was kind of like a hotspot for the show because a lot of people, like, once they played it, they're just intrigued by it because
Yeah, I
it
was
is
gonna ask a lot
so
about that
different.
because it's very out there. It's definitely we've talked about this internally, but it's like it's a game that's very difficult to describe, and I imagine very difficult to market. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
and
tell
like
us about it.
I don't know how well Kunitsu-Gami is going to do, like,
Mhm.
critically or commercially, but just conceptually, in terms of just whatever everything else on the show, it was just something that kind of people like were commenting on, like, "Hey,
A
have you
high
played that? It's
budget
really
experimental
interesting."
title. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and they had a lot of demo booths for it, so, it was something that was relatively simple to get your hands on because, some of these are more restricted.
Yeah.
It's also coming out a bit sooner, I think, than a lot of people thought,
Yeah, I think it's like
like a month from now.
Next month. Yeah, I was like, when they saw it was like in the middle of next month. I was like, wow, that's very soon. That's crazy. Yeah, so tell us about like more about Kunitsu-Gami and what is this game after like what you've seen of it or played of it?
Okay, so James and I both played this.
Okay.
Basically, it's a stage-based, like, tower defense is the easiest comparison to make. So the demo that we played was at the very beginning of the game, so things stay relatively simple. But basically, your goal is to get the Shrine Maiden, whose name I forget, to the Torii Gate, and you do that with like a currency, gems, and as you're doing that, you basically free these villagers from corruption. I might not be using the right terms that the game uses. I don't have it in front of me, but that's basically what you're doing. And there's
I
a
believe
time
it's defilement, and
defilement.
the enemies are the seethe.
Yeah. So as you make your way towards the gate, time passes, and then when it becomes nighttime, that's when the defilement comes, like, as in the form of monsters out of the gate, and you have to protect the Shrine Maiden. And when basically before they come, you set up your villagers to basically defend certain spots of the path. And you can set different villagers to different, like, jobs, if you will, and they have like different effects on the defilement that come through past them. And then as the defilement are attacking at night, you basically it becomes sort of like an action game where you have like attack strings, heavy attack, or weak attack, heavy attack, a couple of combos. And once you basically fend them off, you and all the villagers that you set up, it's daytime again. You've earned some more currency. You can move the Shrine Maiden towards the gate a little bit more, and then basically that's the stage. And once you get to the end of the stage, you unlock a couple of different currencies. You can unlock upgrades for those classes that you have for your different villagers. There's a couple of different there's a progression system in the game where you can basically improve your abilities in terms of as how do you take on the defilement as they come. And then the second stage in the game was more of a boss fight where it's kind of situated a little differently in that you're not moving the Shrine Maiden towards the gate, but there's just a bigger enemy that comes out, and you kind of have to protect the Shrine Maiden by kind of commanding your villagers to either defend her, to attack the boss, while you're all moving around doing whatever you want, kind of controlling them. And so those are the two stages that I played, kind of the very first two stages of the game. And it was relatively simple, but I could easily see how it could get more complex with, different path, maps and designs and different villager jobs and where you place them and maybe how the defilement come, how they
Also,
attack you and where they attack you.
also, it's worth noting that there's a mechanic that we weren't able to deal with in the preview, which was the actual structures, like the defensive structures you can
Mm.
build.
Oh
Mhm.
yeah, that wasn't in
So
the first level.
yeah, so it definitely seems like there's some like depth to it, and I'm not sure how long the exact like the actual game will be. I'd imagine probably 8 to 10 hours. That feels like what it would be because it takes place on a single mountain, but who knows? Uh, but yeah, like I'm excited to try it out.
Yeah,
Like I
that
don't,
sounds really
yeah.
interesting. I wonder if they'll release a demo for it.
Uh,
I think.
it's on Game Pass, so that's the demo.
Well, I mean, for people who don't have Game Pass,
Yeah,
just a
yeah,
public
yeah.
demo. I think it's one of those games like I feel like I feel like a public demo would serve it well to
Yeah.
kind of, because I think a lot of people still don't have a great understanding about like what this game is.
I don't know for sure, and I didn't ask, but it feels like the build that we played was actually basically final code.
Yeah, it might have been.
Yeah.
When was the release date for that? Did they?
July 17th or something like that, I think.
Oh, that's very soon.
Yeah, 1 second. Let me just double check. Path of the Goddess, Kunitsu-Gami. Gotta scroll all the way down. And the release date is
19th is what I have written.
July 19th. I was close. So yeah, it was probably final code. It's probably final code. But yeah, because the demo wasn't like a bespoke demo in the traditional sense. They were like, hey, start from a new game, and it didn't actually stop us. We just kind of I don't
Yeah,
know.
it very well could have been just the full game, and they were just like, start at the beginning.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I'm kind of interested to check it out. Like when I first saw the trailer, I thought it was just like an Onimusha kind of like.
yeah,
reboot.
everyone was saying that.
But
So,
now you're like telling me it's like a tower defense game. It's like that's kind of different.
I also love how it's called Path of the Goddess, because the whole point is like literally cutting a path for the maiden to get to the Torii Gate. So, yep.
Adam, did you have
Okay.
any other like highlights from the show? Because before you jumped on, James had said that his two highlights were Phantom Blade Zero, and then of course, Monster Hunter Wilds. You mentioned Kunitsu-Gami. Was there anything else that you were like weren't expecting and ended up really like feeling pretty fond to, or anything like that?
I don't know. Kunitsu-Gami was probably the one that I was most interested by. There were other games that we saw that are definitely very, very, very curious about. Like we saw Metaphor. Have we talked about Metaphor yet?
Not yet.
Okay, so the Metaphor demo. So Metaphor ReFantazio. This is the upcoming game from Sega and Atlas and Studio Zero. And so they had a demo for this there, and this was definitely a demo build, not like a full build. And they've announced this on Twitter and whatnot, and I think they're going to have this demo available at a couple other events, like in Japan and whatnot. The demo was basically like 3 different parts of the game that you could access, and we on the show floor there was a 15-minute limit to each. I don't know if that seemed like it was built into the demo. So basically, it's how do I put this? The demo opens up, or at least one of the demo slices that was in there, and you have access to your party and your team. You're going through a dungeon, and James will have to talk about how this might be similar or different from Trails through Daybreak. But you can attack enemies on the field in real time, like before you actually switch to like a turn-based mode after you get like your first hit in on them. And so if the enemies are weak enough, you can just attack them on the field and they'll just be defeated and you'll get your money experience that way. But if they're not weak enough, you'll actually go into like the turn-based battle mode, right? And they've talked about this already. And then the battles themselves, we've talked about this before when we talked about Metaphor. The class system in the game is what really will set this game apart from like Persona, in that you can set your various classes on your various characters, and there's literally like a class tree in the game where like for example, you have your warrior class, and then there's like an upgraded form of the warrior class. There's different branches that you can go through on your class tree. And so like there's going to be, I hope, a bit of flexibility there in terms of how you coordinate your party or how you set up your classes and whatnot. In the demo, it was kind of too short to really go too much into that, but it was definitely interesting to see like those menus in place, because I don't think they've really shown those. And then
like you see the potential there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, so our kind of James and I's takeaway was that this sort of feels like a mix between like Persona and just a little bit of like a dungeon crawler, like Etrian Odyssey even. And the reason why I
Yeah.
say that is because of the class system. Obviously, Etrian Odyssey is a big focus on that, but also in battle, this sounds like a small thing, but it's not really. In the middle of battle, you actually can move from like a front row to a back row, basically at will, or at least every turn. And there's some strategy there in terms of depending on like they're actually talking some of the PR people, they were actually talking about some of the strategies where you could have Hulkenberg, who was some sort of knight class, do some sort of taunting skill to basically have enemies basically attack her, and then she would jump into the back row where she would do less damage, but also enemies would do less damage to her. So basically taunting enemies and shielding herself, like, hey, come attack me, leave my party members alone. And so that was like one relatively simple strategy you could do that wouldn't exist in any Persona game, right?
Yeah, and I imagine this also like leaves like row wide skills like on the table as well. Like say for example, like a boss might like have like a pattern where like, hey, at every third turn they have, they'll hit the entire back row. You know,
Yeah,
so like
possibly.
I imagine just like having a row system like that will allow like tactics and strategies like that to expand in that format.
Yeah,
Which is
another big
interesting.
part of the combat was what were they called, James? They were like synthesis skills or synergy
Yes,
skills.
synthesis. Yeah, synthesis. So
That
basically, the way it
go ahead.
works is that so Metaphor has a press turn system. You can use these synthesis skills that use two of your turns, and it's basically two of your party members doing an attack in tandem, and they're super powerful, and it's highly dependent on like what your party makeup is at the moment. Uh, so it's fascinating because you have to really consider, okay, do you want to do I don't know the best way to describe it, but it's one of those things where legitimately think that we definitely didn't get enough time to get a full grasp on the battle system, because realistically we only had like maybe 5 minutes with the battle system to get to grips with it, because like
Mhm.
the first demo was very very basic. It was like literally the opening dungeon of the game or something like that. Then the second one was like still very basic, and I think not a full party, just 3 people. And again, didn't get too much to see with it. You saw a little bit of the synthesis, but it was still early enough in the game that there wasn't much to work with. The last 15-minute demo we tried was literally just a boss fight, and that's where we got a chance to play around with it. But again, since we were kind of just like thrown into the fire, it's like we looked at the different skills and the different archetypes ahead of time, but this is really just cliff notes. This is really just
Yeah,
cliff
yeah.
notes, and we're gonna have to see how it feels like once it
It's
comes
always hard to
out.
demo RPG, especially as complex as some of the Atlas battle
Yeah, it'd be
systems.
nice to actually like sit down with this demo for like an hour or whatever to actually like really sift through it. But we were just kind of like, all right, they were like, you have 15 minutes, go. Like, oh shoot.
I think
We've
they've
talked about how RPGs are just difficult to demo to vertical
yeah.
slice.
But
I think
also,
they've
when
made
we
the
were
case
doing
that
this
like it's
boss
different
fight,
enough from Persona. Like I think a lot of people still it's like obviously like equate this to Persona, but I think they've made the case that this is pretty different from Persona to really be its own thing.
yeah, two things. One, like when we were doing this boss fight in this demo, like these synthesis skills sort of like they kind of like appear not randomly, but maybe like some sort of semi-randomly in battle as you do like certain like attacks and abilities. And so it was a little bit hard to grasp like how they exactly like manifest in battle. And it seems to be related to like the abilities that you have in your party lineup, but it was still a little bit hard to like we're literally getting pop-ups on the screen like synthesis unlocked, synthesis unlocked, synthesis unlocked. We're like, what is going on? I don't know if it said unlocked or something else, but it was basically just there's these little notifications that we were having all these synthesis attacks available, but it was a little bit hard to like grasp exactly why. And there's clearly like quite a bit you could do there if you were skilled to the game in terms of knowing what you were doing.
Yeah.
The second thing I was going to say was it's hard to tell if this was just because of the TV we were on, but the visuals were a little bit rougher than I was expecting
Hmm.
in terms of like aliasing
Yeah,
on
Elias,
models
I'm
and
curious.
things like that.
So I know that we played it on some sort of Xbox dev kit, but I'm not sure if it
Yes.
was a Series X dev kit or a One X dev kit. So that might be the difference. I think it was Series X, but also, so we were playing it through a capture card because we played it through Adam's HD60S, which has 4K pass through, but I don't know if it maybe defaulted to 1080p because it was plugged in through that. I don't know. Maybe it
Okay.
was, maybe it wasn't. My main problem with the visuals isn't so much the aliasing, because I'm going to play it on PC, so it's not going to really matter to me. But the texture quality was noticeably low.
Hmm.
And like the one comparison I heard, and Adam, you were the one that made it, where it's like it's very reminiscent of Fire Emblem Three Houses, where the character models are all very detailed, but then you look at the environment, it's like, man, these textures are pretty rough.
Yeah, and I think the character model like styling is similar to Three Houses, though. But yeah, it was just something that stood out. Where like I thought this game would look a little bit better than it does.
Yeah.
But I don't know. So
There's still
it
some
could have
time
easily
left
been the
until-
TV or the capture card or what have you.
It could also
but-
be like an earlier build as well. Who
Yeah,
knows
right.
now.
The TV definitely had motion smoothing on at a minimum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love that.
Okay.
We were wondering if like because this demo is clearly like a well designed demo in terms of like there's 3 different sections that are 15 minutes each. They're showing 3 different things. They have like a unique menu for it and whatnot. We were thinking because of this demo being there and because there was no embargo on coverage that like maybe this demo is going to be a public demo. Maybe they're going to show it at the Xbox showcase because it's got that Xbox marketing, and maybe they'll release it. And nope, that didn't happen.
No,
Could still happen.
they had a similar demo for like Persona 3 Reload where they had like that 2 different modes, and like one was like a battle oriented mode for like the first full moon boss, and then
Oh, yeah.
and then there's like another mode for like just like the beginning of like the Tartarus, pretty much. So I think Sega Atlas have like now like kind of solidified like this whole new like trade show demo format of like, okay, we'll have builds of this game, and then like they'll be segmented up in this way. So they have like a new format now for these kinds of games.
Yeah, I think it'll probably show up at Anime Expo because they do have like a few panels.
Yeah, I
and,
imagine it'll be like in PAX West as well. They'll probably have this Metaphor demo there.
Yeah, at a minimum, I bet they'll have it at the Sega Atlas booth during AX, and they
yeah.
might release it. They might release it like as like a panel announcement. It's like, and you can play the demo today. That sort of
Maybe.
thing.
I have my doubts because they didn't do that for Persona 3 Reload. We'll see though.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, we're going to continue as we go through this podcast to talk about your time with Summer Games Fest, because obviously both of you wrote up a handful of previews for what you saw. A lot of the news that we talked about last week, you guys were able to speak to the developers or see the game on the show floor. So some of those things we might revisit. And then, of course, we're going to focus a lot of time on a lot of the things that were shown at the Xbox showcase, which we didn't even cover last week. So we'll announce what was shown as well as talk about your time with the game, whether it was hands-on or hands-off on the show floor. But before we start any of that, I wasn't sure, Adam, if your hardware was going to behave in time. But the big release of this week is Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance. We maybe won't go into detail because obviously we're spinning the 2 plates. We've got that game releasing as well as all the Summer Game Fest news. So we might not go into as much detail as we normally would for Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance. Also, it is a re-release. But here's an opportunity here to talk about your review for the game. Talk about because you obviously covered the game when it originally released on Switch a few years back, and then can make the direct comparison to what is added and updated in Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance. And I think you have seen credits on this game more than anyone else on planet Earth. So you are the consumer and expert on Shin Megami Tensei 5. So just maybe give us like the Reader's Digest for Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance, what it is, what it isn't, and your thoughts on it.
Okay, so and some of this is stuff they've already announced, but I have seen some uncertainty on exactly how this works. So Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance, basically when you start the game, literally at the very beginning of the game, there's a menu. It shows a woman, a girl, and it's like, do you take her hand or not? And basically this is your route split. And if you don't take her hand, you're doing Canon of Creation, which is basically the story of the original game. If you do take her hand, you're doing Canon of Vengeance, which is like the new route. Now, the game is explicit about this. Literally, it'll tell you in plain text, this is Canon of Creation, the original game, or this is Canon of Vengeance. Like, it tells you that.
It's not being coy about it.
No, it's not like you're going to be confused, like, which route am I on? It tells you. And so, when I played this game for review, I did actually Canon of Creation first, which is the original game, because I wanted to see basically like what is new globally, like what is not just new like in the new route, but like what is new in this new release. And I'm playing on PC, or I played on PC, and obviously that's like kind of not the obvious thing is that it performs way better. It's nice to be able to run around in dot at 120 frames per second versus 20 or whatever it was on Switch. I would say like so when you're playing through Canon of Creation, the story is the same. Like I saw a couple other reviewers wondering, like, did they change the Canon of Creation story at all? No, it's exactly the same. No differences there. All like the routing, all the decisions, all like the endings, it's all the same. What is new is that there are a handful of new quests in each region. Some of them are pretty cool. So there's even like a couple of bosses that you could call a super boss, like a really high level challenging boss. And I guess I should say that I really liked the original Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance or Shin Megami Tensei 5 in that it's sort of a lopsided game in that it's really heavily focused on like combat and party coordination and progression and those sorts of things. And the character writing and the story stuff was more just, there for like tone and they're kind of like setting the stage, but it wasn't really driven by those things. So one of my favorite parts of the original game were kind of these boss fights, these challenging encounters, these really, really high difficulty bosses. And they add a few more of those in the quests, in new quests. So that's cool for me. But actually the one addition that I think is like the most functionally like useful, like that actually makes the biggest difference are Magatsuhi rails. So what these are is when you're navigating around these kind of open zone areas, you can actually run into a rail spot. And when you click it, it basically like you rail effectively teleport to another spot later on. Some of these are just, taking you to a new little area that's new to Vengeance that might have a couple of new treasures or maybe a new quest or a new demon, because there are like 40 new demons or something like that. But also there are some of these rail spots that kind of just work like shortcuts. If you remember the original game, especially in like the Chiyoda region, which is the third region, there are a handful of times where it's like, I need to get across this cliff. But in order to do that, I can't just jump the cliff. I need to go the long way around, all the way around this area to get to the other side. But now, once you get to the other side, you can like access a rail spot, and then it's like, aha, now I have a little rail, like a shortcut to get from one side of the cliff to the other. And there's a handful of those spots throughout the game, which are nice. Like for example, there's a handful of these rails like at the Tokyo Tower in the first zone. I think, like for example, I hope I'm not misremembering this. You go south from the Tokyo Tower, you get to like the Mermaid area, and then there's like a rail spot that just kind of takes you right back, which is sort of nice. Just to kind of get around a little easier when you're just kind of exploring or doing quests or whatever, revisiting an area. It just get around a little bit quicker. So out of all of the changes, I think that's actually like one of the most functionally useful ones that I actually like really, really appreciate it's there. Mm-hmm. What else? There's new demons, new quests.
There's a bigger emphasis. I know you didn't really mess around with it when I was talking to you about it, but like there's a big emphasis on like demon magatsu, like multiple demon magatsuhi like skills.
Yeah, so most of the quests like rewards are the same, but there are some slightly new ones. And there's so in the original game, one of the collectible items you could get were talismans. And what a talisman did in the original game was it unlocked a Magatsuhi skill for a certain like race of demon, like Wilder or Genma or whatever. You get like a talisman that basically allowed them to have like their Magatsuhi skill, which kind of works on a separate meter than regular skills. And one thing I'll note, in the original game, these talismans did not transfer into New Game Plus. So even if you started a New Game Plus and kept your levels and your demons and your money and everything else, you didn't keep those talismans, which I always thought was sort of weird.
Yeah.
In this version, you do. So like once you get a talisman that unlocks, I don't know, the Fury class or Fury race skill, you have it forever. Like even if you jump to the other route, if you do a New Game Plus, you still have that skill, which I think is nice. You don't have to do the quest or whatever each time you play to get it.
Right. You could just like.
But does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, you get the talisman once, and then it's basically you have it for the rest of that like file until you start like a brand new game. Anyways, the other thing they added were periaps. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Periaps, and these are basically like talismans, but they're for like groups of demons. Some of them are just based on like demon alignment. Like you'll get like the true neutral periap, which is basically allows for a Magatsuhi skill between two different neutral demons, like of any race or anything. But there's a couple of these periapts that are for like special groups of demons. Like there's one for like felines, which is Ketchi, Nekomata, and Neko Shogun, and they have a skill that they can do if you have all three of them in your party. There's one for like the children of Echidna, which if you know your Greek mythology, that's Orthrus, Cerberus, Hydra, and Chimera.
Yeah, everyone knows that.
Yeah, the game will actually tell you. Like you don't need to try to figure out like who is this for. It'll tell you what
You're going
what
to like
demons
some
are for.
mythology wiki.
Hey,
Like,
like
what?
actually, I was actually doing a tiny bit of research on this.
Uh-huh.
There's a Magatsuhi skill between Alice, the Red Count, and the Black Baron, which is Nibiros and shoot, I need to look this up. Anyways, this is, I guess, like actually a reference to like the first Shin Megami Tensei.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yeah, where like where how Alice is introduced and how she works in that game.
Oh my gosh.
Like Belial. So it's Alice, Belial, and Nibiros. And I was
Okay.
just like, that doesn't. What do these demons have to do with each other? And it has to do because they had some connection in the first Shin Megami Tensei, I believe. Don't quote me on that. Something like that.
Sure.
There's one between Black Ooze and Slime. There's
Hell
one
yeah.
between Jack Frost, Black Frost, and King Frost. There's one between. It's called the Shadow Warrior Periapt, which is between Kukulin and Skatuth, or however you pronounce that one.
Uh-huh.
These
Gasaha?
Gaelic names. These Gaelic names.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, they never look like how they're never
Right.
pronounced how they look. Heavenly Kings. Anyways, I never used a single one of these.
Rip.
I was gonna ask, like, are these actually useful,
Because-
or are they just more like fan servicey sort of things?
I mean, I don't know. Like when I'm playing through these games and I'm like coordinating my party, like I kind of think of my demons as just like a box of skills in a way. Like, oh, you're a demon with these skills and these resistances, and you know this is what you're allowed to do. This is your functionality. And so like I had a demon that had like some buff skills. I had a demon that was like had a couple of different of the magic skills with concentrate and that the basically like okay, you're my magic nuker. My main character was the physical attacker.
You think about that like more utility, more so than like
I never consciously thought, oh, I'm gonna like make sure I have the 3 cats in my team and make sure they're in my party at the same time and make sure I access their skill. Like that just like there's too much setup there. I didn't bother.
The way I see Adam in like other games that I see him play, like Sega Frontier, for example. Once he learns DSC, that character is just a DSC spammer.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Just
Or
like
you talk about Etrian Odyssey, and you're just like, this person's name is Tank. This person's name is
I
Rogue.
literally name my Etrian Odyssey characters like you're cleric, you're hunter, you're a protector or whatever. Like you're just you have your role.
Another new feature at Vengeance was the demon haunts. Now, yeah,
I don't like the demon hunts. I don't like them.
I've seen people like like the like I've seen some screenshots of like the dialogue, but it's definitely like if you're into the more, I guess, socializing aspect of
Adam, tee it up for
these
us. What
games.
is a demon haunt?
It feels like a chore. So you're running around the world and you fight a boss or you fight an enemy, just a random enemy on the world, and then you'll get like a pop-up like Jack Frost wants to talk to you at your demon haunt. Like, okay, later, Jack Frost. I'm busy. I'm doing something else. And then you'll fight another battle, and it'll be like Nekomata wants to talk to you at your demon haunt. Like later, I don't want to do this right now. And then you get to you fight a couple battles. You get to the next ley line. The ley line are like the save points. And then at the ley line, you can enter your demon haunt. It's just like a new option there. And then your demon haunt, you can talk to your demons. They sometimes have some amusing dialogue. I think Quentin in our staff chat shared one of Thunderbird. If you remember Thunderbird, it was I could eat a whole mountain or something like that. Like, okay, whatever you say, Thunderbird. But and if you talk to them, they can sometimes learn like a new skill, like kind of randomly. Like, hey, what do you think about this skill? And you can add it to their skill list or not. Or sometimes they'll just get like a random stat bonus, like, hey, I just gained 3 strength or whatever. Like, okay, that's cool. But then you kind of have to like go around your demon haunt, and you might have a dozen demons to talk to, and like kind of what I ended up doing is like, okay, I'm just kind of clicking through their dialogue, like, okay, get your skill, get your stats, whatever, get your skill, get your stats, go to the next demon, get your skill, get your stats, go to the next demon, get your skill, get your stats. You do that for like 6 demons or whatever, 7 demons, however many you want to talk to. Like, all right, time to go back out in the field, and you fight one battle, and it's like Jack Frost wants to talk to you. It's like, not now, Jack Frost. I just talked to you. So it kind of just became like this point where I just getting these demon haunt pop up, and I'm just like, I don't care. I'm not. It felt like a chore to have to like a notification on your phone, like you have to clear it off. Like, no, I'm not going to do
But it's
this.
not just your demon. It's also it could be like with Aogami and your
Oh
main
yeah,
character.
those ones are a little different. So like
Okay.
when you complete a certain like story segment, or in the game, Aogami will have a little bit of a chat in the demon haunt. Those ones I'm totally fine with, because those happen just as you progress through the story at certain spots, not just sort of randomly as you fight an enemy, like a demon wants to talk to you. I guess my biggest issue with it is that you end up. My biggest issue, I guess, is that you just have like so many demons, and you're shuffling them in and out of your party all the time. This is pretty typical for Shin Megami Tensei, and just like, I don't think it's worth it to talk to you every time you want to talk to me, because it's like,
I'm trying to think of like the functional like it's just for people who
if you don't leave any stats on the table.
Like, if people like don't want to like let go of like a certain demon, for example, it's like, okay, you're gonna stay with you no matter what, and I'll just
talk to you every single time and get your stats as high as possible. Possibly.
I guess that sounds crazy, but I mean, functionally.
Yeah. So like for example, my final party in this game was Metatron and spoiler. I don't think they've been revealed. But anyways, Metatron. Like once you get like a demon that you like their party setup, you like their skill setup, you like their stats and their role, like maybe you just talk to them whenever you can, just a slight boost at that point, like once you're kind of near like the end of the game where you kind of have your locked in party or whatever. But otherwise it just kind of felt like a chore. So that I even said in my review, this is more of a net negative than a net positive for me. Like, I didn't need this. Like, I don't care.
Let's switch on over to like, okay, so some broad strokes of like what's new functionally like in the gameplay. But like now the canon of
Talk about Vengeance.
Yeah,
I was actually wondering about that. Like, does the canon of Vengeance? You've already kind of described how it's implemented in the selection process starting the game.
Yeah.
So are the two stories like carrying the same weight, or is Canon of Vengeance just original story plus? Just kind of
Okay,
how it's framed and how does it come across?
Okay, so when I was playing this game, I was kind of playing it alongside Cullen, who reviewed it for another site. We both gave it the same score. We both gave it a 9 out of 10. So we both liked this game. But I kind of got the feeling that Cullen, and not to speak for him, but we chatted a bit, he kind of expected it to be more different than it was. It's not really like, this is brand new Shin Megami Tensei 5 turned on its head. It's just kind of rotated a bit. It's the same broad strokes, just like a different approach to it. And as like a game itself, you approach it the same way. So very minor spoilers. Like, this is just kind of like spoilers about structure and spoilers about like how it's different. I promise I'm not getting into like any story things. I know that's new for people. You'll first notice a difference in this route right away. Do you remember in the original game when you run into Yuzuru at like the subway or the train line in the very first zone? This is pretty early on, like within the first half hour.
Right.
You meet Yuzuru again at that train station, and then when in Vengeance, you and Yuzuru, your main character and Yuzuru, are attacked by one of the Kadishtu, and then Yoko shows up. So basically, right away, pretty early on in Minato, which is the first zone in the game, Yoko shows up. Something new is different, and then Yoko tags along, and that's actually like she's with you for a large swath of the game. And that's actually functionally the biggest difference between Canon of Creation and Canon of Vengeance from like a narrative character perspective. Now, I've gotten some pushback on this comparison, and maybe I shouldn't have made it, but I'm going to try to explain myself.
Okay.
In Canon of Creation, the characters that are like your ciphers, like your route paths, are Ichiro, Yuzuru, and Yakumo. And I compared this lightly to Shin Megami 3 Tensei Nocturne, in that none of these characters are like tagging along with you. You just kind of interact with them at moments here and there. You kind of just cross paths occasionally, but most of the time you're by yourself. And that was similar in Nocturne with Chiaki and the other guys. I forget their names. Where these are basically your people that you're either siding with or not in your routes eventually, but they're not like a party. They're not like with you, really. That's the comparison I'm making to Nocturne. Some people gave me pushback on that, but I'm just comparing like how the characters are interacted with. In Vengeance, Yoko tags along with you for quite a long section of the game, and also Tao a little bit later on. And this is a very light spoiler, but I think this is useful to know, and it's kind of evident pretty early on. Your ciphers in Canon of Vengeance are basically Yoko and Tao, those two characters. You're kind of choosing between them. And this is more like Shin Megami Tensei 4 to me, in that they're tagging along, they're there, they're more present, and they'll comment on things you do in your side quests, and they'll even sometimes be like choices you make where it's kind of delineated where Yoko likes this choice and Tao likes this choice. And that to me was a little bit more like Shin Megami Tensei 4 with Walter and Jonathan. They're kind of tagging along, they're kind of arguing, they're giving their philosophies here and there at times.
Yeah.
And so that's the light comparison I'm making. I'm not saying Vengeance is like Nocturne or like 4. It's just there's a slight difference in how like the characters work between the two routes.
Yeah.
And that is functionally the main difference there. So I think people who liked Shin Megami Tensei 4 and kind of liked a little bit more of that like persistent feedback from like characters, you get a little bit more of that in Vengeance because they tag along. And there's Yuzuru and Ichiro are also in this route, and they are similar to what they were before. They do get a little bit more like intersection with the story, a little bit more interaction with each other. I actually do think Yakumo, out of all the characters, Yakumo is the kind of the devil hunter katana guy, if you remember him. He's with Nua. He actually gets quite a bit more screen time in a little bit of a different role in this route. And I actually think he was probably the one that like benefited the most almost out of the existing characters. So long story short, you meet Yoko relatively early on, and then throughout the entire game, Yoko and then slightly later Tao tag along, and that's basically the kind of the character focus on that route. You meet the Kadishtu, which are the 4 new demons, like female kind of snaky demons, and they have a goal that you learn about. I won't spoil it. In terms of game structure, now this is something I expected based on what they said. They said Canon of Vengeance, by they I mean Atlas, has 1 new zone and 1 new dungeon. If that's the case, that means some of the zones and some of the dungeons are the same.
Yeah.
Because the game is just not clearly just 1 zone and 1 dungeon. So basically, again, a very light spoiler, but I just think this is useful to know. You go through Minato, which is the first region of the game. It's basically the same as before, and most of the quests are the same. There are some slight like story differences at certain spots in Minato in Vengeance, but it's the route, the zone itself is the same. Like if you've played Shin Megami Tensei 5, this will feel very familiar. Like the quests are the same, where the demons are found are the same. There's, it's the same place. And then you go into Shinagawa, the second zone, and once again, it's 90% the same as it was in Canon of Vengeance or Canon of Creation. There's a couple of new events that take place on Canon of Vengeance, but like as you're exploring the zone, it's gonna feel really familiar because it's the same zone. And then the third zone is different. So on Canon of Creation, you go to Chiyoda. On Canon of Vengeance, you go to Shinjuku. So that's basically like the split point. And then in Shinjuku, this is a brand new zone. It actually does like just copy paste some of the quests that were in Chiyoda into Shinjuku.
Okay.
Just like it's the same quest, just like in a different spot because it's in a different area. Now you approach this new zone the same way as you would approach any zone. Okay, kind of exploring, you're seeing treasures, you're finding the Mimon, and anything else in this zone, and it's brand new. But that's the one new zone content. And at the end of Shinjuku, a bunch of stuff happens. There's a big story event there on Canon of Vengeance. I won't say anything. And then after that, you go into Taito, which is the last zone of the game, same as Canon of Creation. I should mention that the dungeon at the end of Shinjuku is a new dungeon. It kind of replaces the Demon King Castle. Mm-hmm. So hopefully that painted a picture of like how it's actually different. The one new zone and the one new dungeon basically substitute Chiyoda and the Demon King Castle, but the other 3 zones are basically the same.
It's not like it's not like a reinvention of SMT like with this route or anything.
Yeah, the reason why I mentioned that is when I was talking to Cullen about it, he seemed slightly disappointed that was the case. Not majorly disappointed, just slightly. It's just like, well, when they say there's only one, or when they advertise there's 1 new zone and 1 new dungeon, I kind of expected, okay, some of these are gonna kind of just lie on top of each other. But anyways, I won't spoil anything. Sorry if I said that too much. But one thing that is interesting about Canon of Vengeance is that your ending decision, it's not like Shin Megami Tensei 5 this might actually be a slight break of embargo, but I think it's useful to know as you're playing through the game. Sorry, Atlas. Is that you don't make your ending decision at like a decision point as you did in the original Shin Megami Tensei 5. It's actually a little bit more like classic in that your ending is just dependent. You'll fall into it depending on what you do up to it, like the choices you make, the quests you do, and whatnot. So it's you effectively choose your ending based on your actions, but it's not like at a singular point like it was in the original game where it's like, which ending do you want?
Yeah, that was so goofy.
Yeah, that was a little weird.
To me, it's like,
I
isn't that how it
admittedly.
should work? Like, I don't understand otherwise.
It's like Shin Megami Tensei 4, where there's a certain point in that game where it's like, at this point, whichever alignment you have, you're going to fall into the law, neutral, or chaos endings. It's similar. So that's all I'll say. That might be a slight break of embargo, but I think it's useful to know if you're playing through it.
I really hope 4 and 4 Apocalypse get like a re-release on modern platforms because I really want to go through 4's neutral path again. I love the neutral path in 4. It's great.
Now, the last thing I'll think of is I'm still not like, I have to be very careful here. I'm still not like fully enamored with how this route ended. It's just like, oh, that was okay. I wasn't really a big fan of the original endings either, and I don't think these endings, or like, not just the ending, but just like where the story takes itself, it's just like that's not the main draw to me. So I've had some people literally ask me like, is the story better? And I'm like, kind of.
You want to know the truth about what I think. I love Nocturne. I place it on a high pedestal. I think every ending in it except True Demon ending is garbage.
I mean, 3 of them are literally like, it's kind of funny how people like complain in the original Shin Megami Tensei 5 that like 3 of the endings, or even all 4, is just like the same, like, we can spoil the original game, right? You're walking in like this space zone, and it's just like some dialogue is different. Well, in Nocturne, which is a beloved game, like most of those endings are like you're on like a desert, and there's like, I'm trying to remember, like a gravestone or some sort of like pillar or something, like, and like 3 of the endings are just that you're in a big desert spot, and like the dialogue is very slightly different. The only ending people care about is True Demon.
Yep,
because
exactly.
it's, you know,
I think they're like Nocturne is like there's only one good ending out of like how many
5 or 6.
Yeah. So
there's like there's also like a give up ending, and then there's the kind of forget everything, we're back to school ending. So anyways, so yeah, I don't put a lot of weight on endings, but I don't think that's, if you were disappointed in the original game and you're like, is the story better, which people have asked me, I'm just like, slightly. If you have not played Shin Megami Tensei 5 and you played this game, you're like, which route should I do, and you're only planning on doing one, just do. I do think Canon of Vengeance is probably the better one to do, the new one. It's a little bit more outward. I would say there's more dialogue. It's just a tiny tilt more towards like a story-driven game. There are things in the game like quests and mechanics that do require you to complete both canons and multiple
I think
routes.
this is the most frustrating part for me because eventually, like before I die, I do want to like do all the optional super things in this, but they require both routes and if you wanted to do them quote unquote efficiently, you would like start creation first and then vengeance. And it's like
I won't spoil it. We have a page on our website. You can look up Godborn mode, and this will spoil it. Someone already complained that I spoiled it for them. Sorry. Whatever.
But, oh well,
I'm not a big spoiler guy, so I'm a little bit loose when it comes to spoilers. But if you wanted to like play Vengeance like efficiently, and like you didn't want to do all the routes, but you wanted to get like all, like if you wanted to get to all the super bosses, it actually makes more sense to do the canon of creation first, like the old stuff.
So fucking Atlas, dude.
Or to replay the old game.
Yeah, pretty much.
Now, to be clear, so I have gotten all the endings, which is 6 of them, and I actually played through it a 7th time also. It's kind of like the original. Yeah, well, it's kind of like the original game when that I played, like I said, I played Canon of Creation first, and I played it normally. I was skipping some scenes and whatnot because I'd already seen it like 12 times, but I played it normally, and that takes 50, 60 hours or something like that. That's the normal length of the game. But then at that point, when you jump into New Game Plus, you have really high level demons, you've gotten all the bonuses and whatnot, and then like the subsequent routes, I did when I was actually playing this game, I actually did all 4 Canon to Creation endings first before I even touched Canon of Vengeance. But you can like blitz through the game in like 2 hours on a second playthrough if you skip everything. So it's like one normal playthrough and then a bunch of just like, blitz as fast as I can through the game.
Yeah.
So one of my point is that New Game Plus does make this easier. You don't have to play through a 60 hour game 7 times or 6 times or whatever. So anyways, that's all I'll say. Unless you have any other questions.
Does it make the original game completely redundant now that it's completely gone from the digital store?
I mean, it's improved. Like I said, there's a bunch of global improvements. There are new like super bosses and quests in that route that are exclusive to that route. So there is reason to do it for new content.
So obviously we talked about this when Vengeance was announced, or not when Vengeance was announced, but when Alice announced that they were going to delist the original game. It's just kind of like, why? Like, it sounds kind of snobby, but there's no harm. Like, why not just have the original game as it was, as it released in 2021, and make it available so you can compare what was added over time, rather than like pretend. They're not pretending it never happened, but they're like a step or two away from that. Just like you can't buy it, the original game, can't experience it unless you already own it on your digital file or have the cart on Switch. So even if you say like this game is better in every way, you never have any reason ever to go back to the original. That still doesn't convince me. I'm like, but you should have access to the original because you should. And I know that's kind of not a good argument, but
I mean, it's it's kind of stupid, right? Because like it makes sense. Like there's like music licensing issues, and then it's like they didn't renew a contract or whatnot. It's like there's just no reason not to keep it up. Then if it's like it's not because like they should keep it up because they should. It's just because it's like there's genuine, like historical curiosity. Plus, like some people may prefer like just maybe observing like the cadence of the original release of like, hey, when you didn't have like all this like these quote unquote quality of life improvements, like what was like kind of their original like first go at it, like a first draft. Like that's interesting. Why don't you just like keep that first draft still available, maybe at a reduced price? It's like how base Persona 5 is still available for purchase, and
This
some
isn't
people
a
prefer that.
digital. This isn't a digital game, but like I played the original Etrian Odyssey before I played Etrian Odyssey Millennium Girl.
Mhm.
Like I just wanted to
Yeah.
see like what was the very first game like, and then
Yeah.
like how did it like evolve over time.
Exactly.
So it's like the same game. We're like going to remake of the other, but I wanted to see that. There's actually one last thing I want to say about Vengeance. There are a couple of spots in the game that I was sort of hoping they'd tweak, but they didn't. The Temple of Eternity dungeon. I actually like the Demon King Castle dungeon with the air Gus. I mentioned this before. Like, I actually think that's just like enough light puzzle and platforming that I actually appreciate that. It's not too hard. It's not too overwrought. I think it's fine. But the Temple of Eternity dungeon, which is like the later dungeon in the game, is kind of strange in that it's just like a bunch of hallways, and that wasn't touched at all. And I kind of wish after playing through the game, it makes sense why it wouldn't be touched, because like those sorts of things weren't really adjusted at all. But that's still like a kind of a missed opportunity for me. And also those dampener items that you can buy from Gustav's still here. I kind of wish they just made those more expensive for how useful they are. It's like it's just a weird balance thing where like these dampener items basically give you like free turns on bosses, but they cost nothing, and you can stock up 3 of each of them pretty easy. And I don't know, I just kind of wish those were like more valuable, because they are valuable.
Yeah.
Anyways, just a couple of small things like that. Like I wish they made just a slight tweak here. They didn't. That sky view option is actually pretty useful. The new sky view.
Mm-hmm.
It's good. I like it.
Good.
So I guess final thoughts. If you played Vengeance and you just didn't care for it largely because of like its overall philosophy, I know some people, they're really big SMT fans and they really love the dungeon crawling aspects of SMT. And this game just does not have that. Like it just doesn't. That's clearly what they're not what they're going for here. Vengeance is not going to change your mind there. It's like philosophically the same.
If you played the original, Vengeance isn't going to change.
Yeah, it's not going to change your mind there. Now, if you played the original and you were just really put off by like the performance, or if it was just like a bunch of small little hangups that you had, like, man, I wish I could have saved it. I wish I could save anywhere, or I don't know, like traversing around the world takes too long, or what have you, or the menus are too unresponsive. Like the new version will fix a lot of those like smaller little flaws, but it's conceptually, philosophically like the same structure, the same game design. So that's kind of my takeaway, is that it's kind of a polished up version of SMT5, but it's not going to like change what it is. It doesn't redefine
I mean,
it.
it already auto improves it by having like responsive menus, unlike the original release.
Yeah.
So it helps a lot.
So thank you, Adam, for going into details on your thoughts about comparing Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance to the original. And also just thanks to James and Adam for going over your time at Summer Game Fest and your experience in the demos that you saw there. And we're going to have a little bit of that filtered through the rest of this podcast. So
Yeah,
we have
I'm
a
sure
lot.
there'll be other news things where we talk about what we saw at SGF.
Yeah, and on that same vein, there's a lot of written reviews and previews up on the site coming out of Summer Game Fest. I have a couple of them kind of split out here at the very front to shout out, but then there are a couple that I have put kind of later in our little timeline here as we talk about, hey, they showed this new game and you guys got to see it and talk about it, have it filtered through there. So I tried to organize this in a way that made some sense, but also, as always, it's a little bit off the cuff. So here we go. So obviously the written Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance review that Adam has been talking to is up on the site. Another published review that is up on the site as well from Nathan is that we do have the Switch version of the Monster Hunter Stories games that Adam referenced is also up on the site as well. And then going into previews, we talked a little bit already about Metaphor. So I believe, I don't have the author in front of me, this is one of James's previews for Metaphor ReFantazio. It leaves a strong first impression up on the site. Of course, you just kind of heard both Adam and James's initial thoughts on that showing, including its surprising, visual fidelity, even though we don't know how true that is to the actual game. As it came through on the demo. We talked about Kunitsu-Gami a little bit. We talked about Phantom Blade Zero. Both of those have a written preview up on the site. The last preview that I have here, not really tied to Summer Game Fest physically, but just date-wise, the Kingdom Hearts games we talked about did come to Steam. They released in the last week. And then James wrote up a little preview about Kingdom Hearts coming to Steam with a focus on being able to play it natively on Steam Deck. Did you have any inspiration or thought to talk about this right up here, or just kind of let it speak for itself up on the site, James?
I'll let it mostly speak to itself. It is fascinating, though, how we did have some Square Enix folks at Summer Game Fest outright say that, yeah, they it was very much a point with the Kingdom Hearts games to get them playable on Steam Deck, which I don't have to say that, considering they're doing a giveaway for Steam Deck signed by Nomura. So it's pretty obvious that's the case, but it's really interesting to hear companies outright say that they consider the platform important for them, which should be interesting going forward. Yeah.
So obviously, anyone who was following all the streams and shows over the weekend, there's a lot of reveals, a lot of trailers, and I had to pick an order. I kind of picked two games to talk about here at the start. I know we're an hour plus in, but at the start of our news section of the podcast, one of which we were expecting to talk about. The fact that we're going to be talking about it first is not a surprise. But then the second game was truly a surprise that we'll talk about it when we get there, but the word of mouth and the kind of the reception to the second game was, I think, kind of universally wow, this is something that, invigorated the rest of the show. Before we get that, we're going to talk about Dragon Age, the Veilguard. And this one is there's a lot to unpack here because, of course, Dragon Age has been dormant for so long. We talked last week about the name change. There's been, BioWare's, leadership has rotated in and out over the last couple of years. This game kind of has a lot of I don't want to say baggage, but it just has a lot around its neck in terms of, I don't know if that's a gentler or a more severe way to phrase that, but the Dragon Age: The Veilguard is a game that has a lot of eyeballs on it, and we have 4 different articles up on the site talking about this from different perspectives. Of course, there was the initial trailer shown on the show floor. That was the cinematic trailer with Barrack and Harding. Then they had a gameplay demonstration that was revealed later. There was the interview that Alex put up on the site as well. And then Adam also put a preview up based on your impressions seeing the game on the show floor. So I know you were just talking a lot, Adam, but because you wrote the preview here, I'm going to just hand the microphone back over to you. So Dragon Age the Veilguard, you got to actually see hands off what the game plays like a little bit to a greater extent than what we were able to see initially, though I think a lot of that footage has been uploaded since. But just your impressions comparing the cinematic trailer to the gameplay, what the reception was on the at the floor for Dragon Age: The Veilguard.
Okay, so the demo that we saw on at Summer Games Fest, it included like the 20 minutes that they showed publicly that they uploaded, but it was actually showed quite a bit like surrounding that also. So basically, the public what they showed, the 20 minutes, is only just like a small, like roughly half of what people on the floor saw. And as far as I know, like what we saw like the character creator, and we saw a couple more, you know, a little bit more gameplay and a little bit more cutscenes that I don't think has shown up anywhere else. Like I don't think that was ever made public. But so when I went into the demo, I'm pretty sure I went into the demo without having seen anything. Like that was even before the trailer dropped, like the first trailer, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure. Anyways,
it was a lot of back to back this weekend. It makes no worries.
Yeah. So anyways, so going into the Dragon Age demo, they first showed off the character creator, which, like I said, I don't think this has been shown anywhere else, and it's very clear that they are very proud of this character creator, and they put a lot of emphasis into it. So if you're the type of person who loves like building yourself or a character or whatever in like one of these sorts of games, like they put a lot of work into this in terms of body shapes and body skin tones, and they put a lot of effort into like the hair. And they talked a lot about how like they wanted the hair to not only like look good and have a wide variety of different hairstyles, but also like behave well in terms in like wind or in different environments on the shore or what have you. So they put a lot of effort into like making your character look good. And so we spent maybe, I don't know, 5-10 minutes talking about the character creator. And then after that, we saw, so it's basically what happens just before. First of all, did you see you saw the 20-minute gameplay?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm just going to assume that people have seen it. So what we saw behind closed doors starts just before that, where you enter a bar. And the story premise is, and as far as I understand, this is literally the very beginning of the game, how it actually will start, is Varric is looking for information from the bartender for a character named Nev. And Nev basically knows where Solus is because they need to stop him. If you played Inquisition, you know why. And so Varric seeks out a friend of his or someone he knows named Rook. And this is your character. Your character's like kind of like character name is Rook. I think you can give him a real name, like a character name if you want, but kind of like Shepherd, like Rook is what they call him. Like that's his character in universe
that's basically what they did in 2 as well, where you choose the first name, but I hope I get this right. But his last name's Hawk, so they just call him Hawk.
They call him Hawk. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you give him a name, but that's like the name that the character will give him.
I think I do think that's a fun approach for a creative character. It's not complete insert. It's not complete pre-written. It's
right.
like you are customizing a character that already inhabits the world.
Right. And then you get a choice here where basically you can either do it diplomatically or like aggressively through fighting. Now, this leads to like a fight scene. We did the fighting option, not like an actual combat encounter. And then you get the information you need about which way you need to go. And there's a little pop-up there that's like, Varric will remember this or whatever, kind of like Thaumaturge or whatever, but or other Western RPGs. So kind of implying that, okay, there's going to be some choice and consequence that might affect how characters think of you. I don't think like the outcome of the mission would have been any different, but at least like someone's opinion of you. And then you need to go find Nev Galish, you know where she is, so then this is where like the public demo starts, what they released on YouTube. You are going through Minrathous, and I have to admit I've never played like Inquisition. I have played most of Origin. And so Minrathous, I understand it has been mentioned several times but never shown. So like this is for Dragon Age fans a big deal. Like, okay, here's what Minrathous actually looks like, the capital of the Tevinter Imperium. And I think visually this game looks quite good. There's a slight stylization to it. I've heard compared to like Amalur or Borderlands or sometimes even World of Warcraft, although I think that's maybe a little bit too strong. But the characters are not quite photorealistic, but you know, your opinion on that may vary in terms of the visual style. But in person, it looked pretty darn good. It's very cinematic. And this is where, when I wrote my preview on this, I kind of felt a little bit underwhelmed in that this is the gameplay demo that they decided to show. Like, this is the first time they're showing this game. And it's like the tutorial level of the game. So it's very linear, very guided, very cinematic. You know, you don't really have like a lot of decision on what you're doing or where you're going, and you're like a level 1 character with one skill, depending on the class you chose, a warrior, mage, or rogue. And like, I honestly think this would be fine for like a tutorial level, just sort of easing players into like, here's how combat works on a very basic level. You know, here's what the UI is like, here's what movement is like and whatnot. But as like a demo of the game, like, I'm left uncertain, and this is basically what I wrote up. Like, how representative is this very first level in the game of like the rest of the game? Because tutorial levels are usually, you know, you have your training wheels still on, right? Like, I want to see what it looks like when the training wheels are taken off. Like, what does it actually look like for the bulk of the game?
I think,
So
I think it would have been like so good, like for this game, if they like at least gave us like, you know, what this like a gameplay slice of like a say like 15 hours in or 20 hours.
Yeah,
in.
and like, for example, the Monster Hunter demo that we saw wasn't the very beginning of the game. I'm sure it was relatively early, but it wasn't like hunting your first monster, you know?
Yeah.
So like, in most of the demos we saw, Metaphor or whatever, I think Kunitsu-Gami was the very beginning, but like most of the demos we saw were like at least a couple of hours into the game to like more represent the bulk of the game. So like, basically my takeaway is this is probably fine for like a tutorial, easing players into the game, but it leaves me very like uncertain about a lot of things. And in fact, some of the other articles that we'll talk about in a minute here kind of try to touch on that, but I still really wish they like showed it rather than just talked about it.
Yeah,
Anyways.
because I just feel like every reveal of the Veilguard they've shown like just has not gone well.
So
this is like such a important like first showing. Like the debut trailer at Xbox was not the greatest thing.
Mhm.
And then what they showed at the 20-minute gameplay slice, it's like at least it reaffirms like people who were expecting Dragon Age. It's like, oh, this is not the Dragon Age that you probably want from those fans. You know, at least it conveyed that, and that's it's like, oh, they're really gonna go all in on this action RPG approach, even though they try to say they aren't. It's clearly what they showed. It's that, hey, you kind of hack and slash and then press button to awesome that has a 36-second cooldown, and then you can't control your other party members except if you want them to use skills.
And that's
It's
very
like,
Mass
okay,
Effect-ish.
yeah.
And a lot of people made that comparison.
And people don't want Mass Effect; they want Dragon Age. So
Now, I think so. They put a lot of emphasis on like characters, and even like the choices. You all saw this in the demo that they showed, like the public demo, the YouTube demo. They showed like some of the choices that you make throughout this tutorial mission, and they don't like change the outcome of the mission. It's really just kind of like, which character are you aligning with? Like, there's a couple of choices where it's like, if you pick this one, Harding, one of the characters, will like you more, or if you pick this one, Nev will like you more. And so it seems like a lot of the choices that they showed in this demo were less about like role playing the route of the mission or whatever. And mission is another thing I'll talk about, but it's more just like which characters like you. And that's kind of very Mass Effect-ish. So,
yeah, it's really frustrating too, because it's like, yeah, because you have like a little symbol over each choice, and it's like, okay, well, let's say, like, you know, if we're doing the Mass Effect comparison, right? Like, if there's bonuses tied to like always like leaning on this like symbol or relationship, you know, you'll get like gameplay bonuses, like how Mass Effect had like the Paragon and the other route.
Renegade.
You know, it's like, why would you ever pick other choices when you get gameplay benefits, you know, by just sticking with this? It's like it just feels like a mess, you know. Like,
and also,
from
now
what
I know
saw.
this game is like 15 years old now or whatever, but I was literally playing Dragon Age Origins last night. And I was doing the Orzammar quest line, and you make a lot of choices in that quest line that actually affect like the state of that city and where it goes. Now I know Origins is a couple games removed and a different style of game, really, but like there are choices that are more than just which characters like you. It's actually like what happens in this region of the world. And so we don't see that. I'm not saying it doesn't exist in Veilguard, but they don't show that. And then also the mission thing. They heavily implied it in our demo, but I guess in an IGN interview, they pretty much just said it. This is a mission-based game, which at first that seems. I've heard a couple of different kind of hypotheses on this. One friend at RPG Fan I was talking with, Zach Wilkerson. His take, and you can read his preview on his site. I'll shout out their site. Was that this kind of feels like almost a reaction to Inquisition. Now, Brian's played Inquisition, right? I haven't.
Yeah.
I'm getting there.
Yeah.
Inquisition is open zone, and as I understand it, that's actually something that kind of drew a lot of criticism, was that these zones were kind of meandering, maybe full of a bunch of filler. Exhausting these zones is just kind of a lot of busy work or what have you. And his take, Zach's take at RPG Fan, was that like this feels like a response to that. Like, okay, we're gonna cut out all the filler. We're going to cut out the zones, and we're going to make it mission-based. And the wording they used a lot was highly curated, like very, very story-driven, very character-focused, very narrative-focused missions. Now, they mention in interviews that, like, okay, the first area is very linear, but there's going to be some areas where there's some exploration, a little bit more open up and whatnot. But unfortunately, they just never, like, showed that. So we just have their word to go on. Now, when I hear this, and other people have made this comparison too, it's like Mass Effect 2 was kind of mission-based in that you basically have your like home base, your Normandy in that case, and then you go out on like these different like side quests for your different characters and the different, as you prepare for the suicide mission in that game. So I made that comparison that it sort of feels like maybe this is the Mass Effect 2 of Dragon Age.
I do like
and
how
maybe kind of
Josh
focus in
earlier
that
was like,
sense.
do Dragon Age fans want Mass Effect? And you're like, well, this is the Mass Effect 2
No.
of Dragon Age. So yeah.
No, I mean, that's what it feels like, and I am definitely not the only one who's made that comparison.
Right.
But the thing is, though, is a lot of this is just sort of like imagination based on what they say, and I really wish they showed it. That's basically what I keep going back to. It's like it's just not a great demo. And so basically, my title of my preview was Dragon Age Veilguard looks to be a character-driven spectacle, but it leaves uncertainty about its role-playing depth.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of the role-playing depth, not just like exploration and choice and consequence and things like that, but like how do the classes work? How do the skills work? They showed off the character creator a little bit, but like when you're showing like a level 1 character with one skill, it's hard to really get a grasp on that. So Alex Donaldson, who is our site boss, site founder, he actually saw the demo a little bit later than I did because he was just in a different session. And he actually, as far as I understand, he wasn't scheduled an interview, but he basically kept pestering them with questions that they kind of pulled him to the side, like, okay, get over here. Nice. We're going to talk to you. That's what Alex would do. And he actually got to talk to the director, Corinne Bush, sorry for mispronouncing her name, about the game. And she actually said, and I didn't really expect this, that it was inspired by Final Fantasy XII. Apparently not necessarily like Gambit system, but specifically like license board. And again, I don't have any pictures to go off of, so I just have to like go up on the word. She talks about these skill trees for each of the classes that you have.
It would be nice if they showed this,
Yeah, it would be nice if they showed this. You start in the center, and then you basically have like your specializations, which are a Dragon Age thing. I might have said Dragon Quest at some point. I mean Dragon Age. Anyways, you start at the center, then you can kind of work your way towards different specializations that you want. And you don't. She emphasized you don't necessarily want to just like min-max all into one specialization. You can kind of do a little bit on one route and do a little bit of specialization, like skills in another routes and whatnot. And they compared it to Final Fantasy XII and a little bit to the Sphere Grid as well in Final Fantasy X. Gameplay definitely doesn't remind me of either of those. But in terms of skill trees, that's what they mentioned. And then she also mentioned that like your different companions will have their own skill trees, sometimes with like unique skills, unique to those companions to make them feel a little bit different from each other. And obviously you have like 7 different companions in the game. You can only pick 2 to join you at any time. So there's a little bit of party balance there. So yeah, Alex got to talk to her a little bit about like role-playing elements and basically talking about like character customization and skill building and whatever, party building. But again, it would have been nice if they showed any of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
This,
that's kind of like
there's also BioWare is also like between a rock and a hard place in terms of like timing of when they unveiled this, right? Because they're unveiling this a year after Baldur's Gate 3. And Baldur's Gate 3 showed to everyone last year that CRPGs can still be massively wildly successful. And for a lot of Dragon Age fans, a lot of like what they still fondly remember of Dragon Age was in Origins and still having those CRPG roots. So a lot of the feedback from the unveiling of the Veilguard this past week was like, why isn't it a CRPG? Baldur's Gate 3 did it. Why didn't they do it? And that's just the consequence of like an extended development cycle of like they had a vision for it already set in stone years ago.
now I have heard some people like criticize anyone who makes that comparison. Like, how dare you compare this to Baldur's Gate 3?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I get that. Like, I get in terms of like you don't want to just make like, I'm not saying that you are, or just like, why isn't it more like this other game? Because they're unique games. But like the first Dragon Age Origins was quite literally a follow up to Baldur's Gate 2. Like from the same developer. And like I'm playing it now, like I just said, and it's very obviously like the next step from that.
Yeah.
Now I know Dragon Age since Origins has kind of moved away from it. But when Baldur's Gate 3 is back in the mix, granted through another developer, I think making the comparison between those two franchises is valid because they basically are already connected in a way. So I'm fine with that. But also, we'll probably talk about this a little bit later too. This is whatever. But like, Obsidian showed Avowed recently, and they had a demo and a little bit of a gameplay showcase also. And I saw some chatter about like how Obsidian showing Avowed, showing a slice from the middle of the game, and it's roughly releasing in the same time frame. Both these games are coming out this year. I actually saw some funny comments. I won't quote them here, but basically how Obsidian is actually showing like, here are how the role-playing elements in our game work. Like they literally show, here's the skill tree, here are the classes, here are your companions and what they can do. And like Obsidian is showing their role-playing elements. It's a different sort of game. It's like first person and whatnot versus it's still an action RPG, but it's first person, so it's not quite the same. But like they're at least showing these things like from the middle of the game.
You can play Avowed in third person as well.
Oh yeah, they did show that there is a third person mode too, which I think a lot of people will be happy about. I'll be grognard, played in first person probably, but
the correct way.
But yeah, I just saw some people basically saying like, "Hey, Obsidian is showing what their game actually is. You could do that for yours." So yeah, and my point is again, I wish they just showed more.
Do we actually think that the Veilguard will hit their fall 2024 release date, or do you think it's going to get delayed?
I mean, it's been in development for. I know I've also seen some criticisms to people saying Dragon Age has not been in development for 9 years or whatever. It's like, yeah, but it's been like, when was it teased? Like 2018? And like, that's a long time ago.
That's been almost 8 years, I would say, is it?
Well, it's probably been rebooted at times and whatnot, and the scope has changed, I'm sure.
It'll be like Final Fantasy 15. It'll be like, oh yeah, it's technically 10 years, but the actual development cycle is more like a couple of years. But
yeah, it's probably similar to that. But anyways, it's just been such a long time. It feels like it's been a long time coming. It would be a real disappointment if they just couldn't make it this year. But yeah, anyways, so when I first got back from this demo, I think I posted just like in the chat, just basically a GIF of like The Office where someone's like, I don't know about this because I don't know about this. I am really enjoying Dragon Age Origins though.
Excellent game. So there are two pieces of news that came out like of different interviews. I'm not sure specifically where these came out of, these two nuggets, but one, BioWare stated that Dragon Age Keep will not hook into the Veilguard. Dragon Age Keep was the website account-based thing that could basically save file manage your choices between the first, second into Inquisition. And people
Yeah.
were wondering, do I have to make sure that my account is all set up ready for Veilguard? Is there going to be a direct transfer? And they basically said no, which I actually think I'm okay with, having a clean slate.
Yeah, it
Like,
lowers the hurdle of entry. Like,
Yeah.
if you were new to the series and wanted to play it, it's like, wait, do I have to play 3 games before? It's like, no, it's kind of a clean break.
or am I going to have like a not as good experience if I don't have a direct import versus a fresh file? It's like, no, it's just fresh. Like, I'm okay with that completely, but that is one thing they've confirmed. The other thing
Yeah.
they've confirmed, which is really, I know this is kind of a big deal for lots of BioWare fans, and that they've stated, and this is not really a surprise based on how character-centric all of their marketing has been, and even their demoing, it seems like, based on how Adams described it, but all 7 companions will be romanceable regardless of what the player selects. So there is no gender or orientation related limitations there. So it's player centric in that way, which is not how previous games have worked. For instance, like Dorian, very important to his character, is a gay male, and etc. and so on. And there's been a lot of discussion on that about, yes, that's how it should be. No, I don't like it that way. They've stated that the 7 characters in the Veilguard will be romanceable regardless.
They've also said though that first of all, I don't care that much about character romance in these games. I know it's a big deal. I just don't. But one thing I heard that I think is actually kind of nice is if you don't romance a character, they might romance like someone else, or they might basically become a couple with another one of the characters. Which I actually think, I don't know exactly how that'll work like functionally, but I actually appreciate that because it makes it more like clear that these other characters in the game have lives that don't revolve around the player character.
Yeah.
It's like, that's kind of nice. Like if
Yeah.
you have no interest in romancing Harding or whoever, like she might just basically form a relationship with another character because why not? It's not just you or nothing. So I think I like that.
I think it all boils down to execution, right? Like I personally don't really mind if they're all pansexual or not, but like at least make the writing around
Yeah.
like the romance like convincing and believable and charming and wholesome. Just that's fine with whatever you decide to do. At least just don't fuck up on the writing on it, because that's the thing that like people care about. Is like
Mhm.
they're gonna have that. Don't fuck.
Yeah, my preference, like for me, it is low on my list. Like it's like the 7th or 8th or 9th thing I really care about. But I do prefer when they have like certain characters are characters and they might be aromantic, or they might be straight, or they might be bi, or they might be gay. Like to me, that just makes it seem like this character is a character and not a cog in a machine. Even though that is what they are, because they are a character in a video game. But I think of characters like Pavarti in Outer Worlds, who part of her story is that she has a crush on someone, but she's asexual. And you having to witness that, and that is you can't have, if that character was to be a companion in a game where romance was explicitly required, you couldn't have her. Or if
Yeah,
Dorian
she
was a
shouldn't exist.
character, in the Veilguard, well, he would have to be completely rewritten. So, but it's also like, well, this is a different game. They've made the decision early on, so like I'm okay with it. My preference is the other way, but I'm not going to say how dare they, sort of thing. So like I
Kenneth Shepard at Kotaku, he actually wrote a piece about like cyberpunk, and that he felt that cyberpunk romances were a little bit too restrictive because it
Yeah.
felt like a Punnett square, where it's like if you're a straight male, this is your female romance option. Like this is your one option. If you're a gay male, this is your option. If you're a gay woman, this is your option. And if you're a straight woman, this is your option. So it's like you didn't really have an option.
exactly.
So it's just
too
kind of
far
like,
the other direction.
yeah. So it's a balance. So
Mhm.
Well, I think that's kind of covers all of the individual nuggets of Dragon Age: The Veilguard. As to answer Josh's question, I would not be surprised if this becomes a Q1 2025 thing. That's just a hunch. I don't really have any way to
Yeah.
substantiate that, but
Right.
obviously I'm
Uh,
hopeful. Well, I don't know if hopeful is the right word, but I want it to be good.
Yeah.
I don't know if
mean,
they've shown me that I believe it will be, but I want it to be good.
I want every RPG or every game to be good, but
There
we
you
all
go.
can't be winners.
But yeah, we have all those 4 features up on the site. Of course, we covered the original announcement, the 20-minute gameplay demo that they published. We've got Adam's preview up on the site, as well as the question and answer session that Alex was able to apparently interrogate out of the
Pretty
developers.
good, yeah. Speaking of wanting a game to be good, Brian.
Yeah, so this game, thinking back on how I teed this up about 30 minutes ago, maybe I overdid it, but this game has been, I think, kind of a highlight of the show. It's basically been the perfect debut trailer, at least debut showing of a game from a new studio. So this is a new RPG from a studio called Sandfall Interactive. This is their debut project. They're based out of France. The title of the game is Clair Obscur Expedition 33. They showed a debut trailer at the Xbox Games Showcase, which has been very positively received from my vantage point. It shows a combination of cinematics, story introduction, character voiceover, some excellent music, and then my favorite part personally, a lot of gameplay with UI. And this is a Western turn-based RPG. It looks really neat. So I don't know for James and Adam, obviously, like, you guys weren't cut off from the internet when you're on site, but when this was shown, like, during the showcase and people were tweeting or redditing along, this got a lot of eyeballs on it, and people thought, wow, what is this? I'm circling this game. What is Expedition 33? Was that kind of the vibe on the show floor as well?
So we didn't actually attend. This is the Xbox. This is at the Xbox.
Yeah.
Right. So we didn't actually attend the Xbox like live showing. It's on the other side of the town. Traffic is terrible and whatever. We're just like, we don't want to pay the Uber. Just watch it from our hotel. Um. So I don't know what like the vibe was in the theater, but this wasn't like playable or anything like that anywhere else. It was just a showing and that's it. So we don't know anything more than you do. But everyone I know that is a fan of like Japanese games or turn-based games or whatnot, we're really excited about this one. It looks really cool. They actually showed quite a bit of gameplay. Thank you, French weebs, for tackling this. So yeah, it's from a French studio. This is, I guess, their debut game, and there's people have compared it to like a little bit of Final Fantasy 13.
Lost Odyssey.
Yeah, it's got that.
It looks
got
great.
that turn-based. It's like turn-based with some real-time action elements.
Mhm.
It's very interesting.
It's funny how like I know multiple people that the way they described their like impressions, like watching this trailer was, oh, this art style is really cool. This looks great. Let's see how the gameplay looks, because there's a certain number of people that are like, okay, this looks good, but let's see how much jank it's looking like it's gonna have to see if I'm willing to deal with that. And as soon as it was like revealed to be turn-based, it's like, oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I mean that was a big surprise. Like, oh shit, like that. Like, and for a
People
lot,
are
like,
finally learning. People are
Mhm.
finally learning that actually turn-based like combat systems are by and large popular. Yeah, there's people that dislike it, but there's enough people that do like it, and it's accessible. Like the two most successful games last year, arguably the two most successful games last year, were turn-based RPGs: Baldur's Gate 3 and Honkai Star Rail.
Mhm.
You know,
can-
Yeah.
what's the most funniest thing is? When I put up a guide for Daybreak, just like the demo guide, the first comment I asked is like, "Can I play this entire game without doing the action part?" That's the first reply I got.
Definitely.
Technically, you could.
Yeah, you could.
Technically, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, but it'll just gonna take a little bit longer. That's
Yeah.
kind of like how I would see it.
So Expedition 33. I really hope they like do like a sort of like a documentary series, like detailing like the creation of this game, because they put out like OST track samples on their official YouTube that I've actually been listening to, and I really like the sound design and the direction they're going with the music in this game. I think it's very it's like orchestral French music, and it's very there's a certain cadence to it that I really dig. There's like an 11-minute track on that YouTube that's like, oh man, they're really going for it and they're going hard on it.
So the composer's name is I'm not going to pronounce it French. It's Lorien Testard, and
Mhm.
like on the website, like his favorite games, I assume it's male, Lorien. I'm not sure. Their favorite games are like Nier Automata and Hollow Knight. I'm like, yeah, I hear that. And then the other thing I didn't say is that the male protagonist. I'm not sure about the female protagonist shown in the trailer, but the male protagonist is voiced by Ben Starr, and
Oh yeah,
does
yeah, yeah.
most does most of the voiceover. Who's the voice of Clive in Final Fantasy 16? He does most of the voiceover in the trailer, and it seems to fit the like everything about the trailer. Like I'm not like I don't have any like authority to say this, but it's just composed really well in terms of the narration, the music, the art style. It starts with like the cinematics, it goes into gameplay, it flips back to cinematics, and then shows like kind of a higher level of like boss fights at the end with some of the timed input things, how the camera's going to work. There's a lot of things you could freeze frame, and because they show the UI, you can glean some maybe small details out of that. Like it just
Yeah,
really is a well-made trailer.
the story premise is interesting because you have this deity entity called the Paintress that wakes once a year and paints a number on her monolith, and this number indicates that everyone at that age immediately will fade away into smoke. And so you're this 33rd expedition, like this band of characters, like this 33rd expedition to try and stop the Paintress from doing this, from basically dooming humanity and so forth. So you actually just have like a neat story hook already right from the get-go that's easily understandable and so forth. And this whole game is developed with Unreal Engine 5. And it is just a looker. It's a very unique, it's a novelty these days of like this like very high budget Western made turn based RPG, and like with that, and it's not like a CRPG turn based like Baldur's Gate 3. It's like, you know, like kind of over the shoulder, almost JRPG styled, like with like the way the health bars are presented and like how the turn order is presented. And you know, when you're going into attack, you almost have the Shadow Hearts esque like window of like, hey, input this to do more damage, or like, and then you see these upcoming attacks. You know, you can react to them and like parry them or dodge them and so forth. There's just like it's a really promising project and a very very strong showing from Sandfall Interactive. Like I think I hope more people take notes of like the way that this game was presented and debuted. It's like it's a little bit of cinematics, it's a little bit of like with HUD gameplay, you know,
Yeah.
and that's all you really need to really just like just get the audience's attention right away.
Well, you don't
Yeah.
like
I was
the
actually looking on
Suicide
their.
Squad like Dragon Age introduction and then hold gameplay till like a separate showing days later.
It's like, yeah. What were you gonna say, Adam?
I was looking at their website,
Uh-huh.
Sandfall, and so it looks like this project started in 2020, which is kind of
Wow.
amusing. Like they started in the worst year to start a development
Yeah.
in. But I was just kind of looking through their posts, and like they got funding from Epic through an Epic Mega Grant. They got funding from the CNC, which is the French National Center for Cinema. They got funding for the Occitanie region, however you pronounce that in French. I'm sorry. Which also gives funding for production of video games. So it's just the French like game development scene is actually like one of the stronger ones, and their government actually puts a lot of support there. So I was just basically saying like, where did this game come from? It's basically that French development scene. It's being published by Kepler Interactive. They do a handful of games. They're doing Flintlock in a couple of months, I think.
Oh yeah, that's
But,
right. Yeah. So yeah,
I'm actually not sure where Kepler Interactive is based off the top of my head, but basically my point is this has been in development for a while, and this is just the first time they've shown it off.
Yeah, just one to look out for coming next year for Xbox Series X and S, PS5 and PC, and day one on Game Pass.
Okay, Kepler is London and Singapore, if it matters.
Yeah. So cool. You know, very great first showing from Clair Obscur Expedition 33. Obviously, the title is a little bit of a mouthful, but you know, we just
Expedition 33. Just I don't think you need that, but I
look,
don't know.
man,
I'm not
we're
calling
the
it.
same
They call it
podcast
what
where
they call it.
look, we talk about Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance, you know.
Hey, French is
not Holly
harder.
and I.
It's French. Give me a break. But yeah. But yeah, obviously we'll
Yeah.
have this one circled, slated for next year. No other window other than that. Obviously very excited to see more. It's been a while. Like I know this sounds kind of goofy, but like it's been a while as an adult where you see a trailer for a new game and it makes you feel like, oh yeah, this is why I got into this hobby, because you see something like this and you're like immediately interested. So very cool
Yeah.
showing from Sandfall for
But,
Expedition 33.
honestly, there's kind of like a direct opposite from this next game that we're going to talk about, which I feel like just not a great another showing of this next game. Would you
All right,
agree,
so
Brian?
So there's a few other games that were shown at the Xbox showcase that we expected to see. Hopefully, start to see some more gameplay for some of these, some more release dates. And we kind of got some of that kind of for the rest. So we'll go into them. The first one I have listed here, as expected, we did finally see another showing for the upcoming Fable reboot reimagining from Playground Games. When we last saw it, it was very much kind of like a tongue-in-cheek cinematic trailer with someone speaking to the camera in like a mockumentary style. And they went with that same vibe again, though they kind of leaned into something that might approach gameplay, but not really. Just to not tease it, they did not provide any release window, any concrete details. The gameplay that we saw was it was no UI, not it was kind of interspersed with this cinematic of this retired hero showing how they came to encounter the female protagonist of Fable. But a lot of it's got that same like Fable, I don't know what you would call it, vibe in terms of being British.
It's British.
I don't know. What else to
British
say.
RPG.
I miss George. But this is it's. I think we kind of wanted to see like some more of the chips on the table here, but it just feels like there's not a lot to latch onto. You feel me struggling to even describe it. Like, yeah, we got another cinematic trailer for Fable. It kind of has the same quirkiness to it. We didn't really see any gameplay. You saw some things where you see the back of the character over an over-shoulder perspective in a town that might be gameplay, but it's not presented in a way that you can really glean anything out of it. They show
honestly,
some.
though,
Go ahead, Josh.
honestly, that like the only substantial news that we got out of this is that Eidos Montreal is assisting Playground Games with the development of this game.
That's actually really curious because
Yeah.
we don't know what else Eidos is working on, right? Because
they on
they
that Tomb
were
Raider
Marvel,
reboot
the Marvel
thing?
game a couple of years ago, but I don't think we had any idea what they were doing since. There's
Yeah,
been
I
like
don't
rumors
think
that the
so.
Deus Ex game that they might have been working on was canceled. Maybe.
Who's
Yeah.
on
They
that
were
big
bought out
Tomb
by
Raider
the
reboot?
Embrace. They were bought by the Embracer group, right? And they did nothing
They,
with their IPs. Was that how it went?
they were bought by Embracer, and Embracer still has them. I'm trying to remember. I think so. Yeah.
But that Embracer had that split, right? Of like, hey, the TTRPG side will incur most of the debt, and then the others is like split into like other groups. Because from what I remember, it's been so long.
Okay, to answer my older question, the new Tomb Raider that we haven't seen anything, but they've said they're working on is Crystal Dynamics, not Eidos Montreal. So that answers my earlier question. So yeah, we
Okay.
don't know what Eidos Montreal is doing other than I guess
I think
supporting Playground on
literally
Fable.
the group now, it's not called Embracer. I think the group is literally called CDE, which is literally Crystal Dynamics and Eidos.
Yeah. Okay.
Like they're their own group, like split off from Embracer, or they're going to be. Very strange.
It's just yeah. So, but other than that, there's not really any more concrete news other than like, hey, it's coming out next year. So okay, all right. So it's kind of a disappointing showing from Fable, to be honest. But I'd like to see more.
Yeah, I felt bad struggling to see that up, but there's really just not a lot to latch onto it. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
been a lot, and the same vibe as the same trailer they showed last time. If it's planning to come out next year, we'll keep an eye on it, and hopefully they'll detail some more. This next one we've already kind of talked about a few times based in comparison to the Dragon Age showing. We were expecting to see this from Obsidian, a new trailer for the upcoming Avowed. So they showed a story trailer for the game at the Xbox Showcase. Later in the week during the Xbox podcast, they showed some extended gameplay with the director, Kerry Patel. And the only thing that's kind of strange here is that actually, maybe I'll hand this off to Josh. We thought we saw the release date here, but then it might have been nixed.
So when they showed it at the Xbox event, they just said 2024. They didn't give a date.
Right.
Yeah.
And then Obsidian put up a post basically saying, "Hey, it's coming out on November 12th." And then like immediately they edited that post, say just 2024. So it's sort of like, so right now there's no publicly saying anywhere what the release date is. It's like they want it to be November 12th, but they don't want to lock it in stone yet. I'm not sure, but it said that at one point, but they have since removed it. So
Yeah. And once again, like the story trailer, just shows a little bit more gameplay. There's been like more deep dives on it, but that were more substantial than like other games. Thankfully, so I mean, I think Avowed shaping up to be like a pretty decent game. I think it's just like a hard game to show off, like in a typical RPG fashion. Like it's just hard to show only snippets of it. But I think the actual like game itself, I think, will shape up to be a pretty decent.
Yeah, so I watched the deep dive, and this is actually they've done a handful of deep dives on this game, and um, they're basically in like an explorable zone. They go into a town, they meet one of your like companions there. They show dialogue choices, and I'm promise I'm not trying to be like mean
Mhm.
or
Yeah.
angry, but
Yeah.
like the dialogue choices, there's like literally a list of like 6 of them you could choose from for this when you're talking to this character. So it's not just like a wheel with 3 different choices there. And they're just in a list. And some of those dialogue choices had like icons next to them that represent like a certain background or a certain trait of your character that wouldn't be there in some situations depending on how you're building your character. And then they show like this exploration of this zone, and one of the things they seem to be emphasizing is just like different types of character builds can kind of go through this zone in different ways, being more stealthy, or if you're magic, you can kind of create a cloak, or if you're more physical, you can just fight your way through it. So it was definitely a more substantial like gameplay showcase than Dragon Age. And they were showing, some of the skill trees that you can do. They're talking about there you can respec. The skill trees are like centered around like the weapon, I think, or the class. I need to look at. Give me a second. I'll mention this in a second. But they're showing some of the skill trees, so it was definitely a much deeper dive into like mechanics and RPG systems more than just like combat.
Yeah. And I think they've done this before also like that Obsidian Avowed like showcase a few months back where like they showed like the choices and the consequences, and but it's like in a more condensed fashion. I think it's just like a really difficult game to like demo, like to show like the scope of like how meaningful your choices are. I think it's just like it, it's inherently difficult for this kind of game.
But yeah, whenever I do see a dialogue tree that it's not in a wheel, it's in a list, and you see like
Mhm.
some sort of traits or talents tied to some of them, like
Yeah.
and then there's some that you can't make because you're not spec the right way. I want to see that personally. Like, I don't want
Yeah.
it to say like this, Paragon Renegade, and different style of game, different dialogues work with different styles of games, but uh, I do remember though that it's like Josh has been saying and repeating, like we saw the same sorts of things with Outer Worlds. I remember when Outer
Yeah.
Worlds first screenshots came out and it showed some dialogue trees. We're like, oh god, like think, Obsidian's back, and then Outer
People were
Worlds didn't.
comparing that to Fallout 4 at the
Yeah,
time.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it didn't set the world on fire, but for multiple reasons. But I'm so glad that we see it here, and then obviously since they have Outer Worlds, I believe Kerry worked on that, and then Outer Worlds 2 was, of course, in development also at Obsidian. So it's just cool to see that they're working on these types of RPGs again, and then have that institutional knowledge. If Microsoft doesn't, cut out the legs from under them or whatever, but being able to like iterate and improve on what they've learned from their previous experience building these sorts of games. So really cool, to see. I'm excited for this. I hope it comes out in November, but because the date was wiped out. It might be a Q1 next year sort of thing. That's the one thing about Xbox that's always been the issue for the last few years is like, okay, you're showing all these games, but they're always years and years out. We're finally now able to say like, oh, I'm looking forward to playing it this year, I hope. So that'd be really cool to finally have that first kind of major horse out of the stable or whatever you want to call it.
Okay, just to follow up on what I said before, your skill trees aren't around your weapons, but around like a class. So there's a skill tree for like fighter, ranger, wizard, and I don't know what this means, but there's one in the menu for godlike and
Okay.
Godlike.
it says godlike. I don't know. Um, and it's hard to tell, but it looks like at level 1 you have access to certain abilities, and then once you get to level 5 in one of these, you can access like another set of abilities. The way she was talking about it on the podcast, the Xbox podcast, is that like you can't like exhaustively have like every ability, but you can respec. There is a cost to respecing, so you can't just do it freely. But if you don't have to feel like you're locked in, like, oh, I created a crappy character and now I'm having a hard time. You can at least there's some way to like readjust things. But like I said, those are the types of things that I kind of wish they showed for other games. But it's really interesting. I'm actually gonna have an interview with her next week.
Okay.
See what she says.
And godlike is a term from the Pillars games. It's been too long since I've
Oh.
played them to remember what they are, but I do know.
I haven't played Pillars yet.
I really want to replay them, but they're so long. I have like the 100 hours in Pillars 2, but Pillars 2 really is a lot more. I feel like Pillars 1 does a lot more world introduction, where Pillars 2 is a lot more self-contained to the one location of the world, the Deadfire Archipelago. And you do see I'm going to mispronounce this, the name of the semi-aquatic amphibian race, the Onmana. I'm butchering that, I know. But one of the companions in Avowed is that race, and they're all over.
And he's voiced by Garrus.
Oh, neat. So yeah.
Garrus fans, you have a character with his same voice in Avowed.
Yeah,
at least I think it's that character. There is a character voiced by Garrus.
Gotcha.
So
let's see, the next game that they showed at the Xbox Showcase. Well, I don't know the next game. I don't know the order that they showed them. The next one that I have listed. This is not one we were expecting to see, and this is one that I had forgotten that we had covered on the site back in 2021, and then it had gone dormant for a while. We got a new trailer for Wuchang Fallen Feathers. This is a, so I think you heard this before, like a Souls-like that is coming out for all consoles next year. So this one, I don't remember much from its initial showing 3 years ago. And I'll be honest, when I watched this trailer before this podcast so that I could speak to it, now I'm like, what did I see again? Because this is one of those Souls-likes that I'm having difficulty seeing exactly what pulls it apart from the others. I don't know if you, going through any of the press release on Wuchang Fallen Feathers, Josh, you were able to glean the core of the identity of this game.
I mean, you're playing a character named Bai Wuchang, and she's like an amnesiac pirate warrior. There's like this stuff that these disease called the ornithrophy disease, and that's kind of like the basic premise of like, hey, you're inflicted with this disease, and like either you'll submit to it or you'll find a cure to it, and then the core of the story is like finding like the truth of like the disease that she's been inflicted with. It'll have multiple endings. There'll be choices throughout the story that like you make. In terms of like specific combat and gameplay, what you see is what you get in terms of like the re-announcement trailer of this game. It's very flashy. It's very cool.
I
You
get
do
a
see
lot
a
of
little bit
Neo
of gameplay.
vibes.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of
So,
Souls like you can compare to each other now, but I get Neo vibes from this one.
Pretty much, like it's sometimes it's hard to like distinguish. Like it's very fast paced between like you see like Phantom Blade Zero, you see this game, you see Where Winds Meet. You see a lot of these like fast paced Souls like games. Like they'll probably play well and like be fun, but like I think it's gonna be. I'll save my my thoughts of like when we see something more substantial or maybe a public demo or so forth. Right? It's hard to really get a sense of like how this game will shape up, but it looks cool.
I don't know why this is interesting to me, but without looking it up, guess who the publisher is?
505 Games,
That's
obviously.
505. Which 505 is interesting because they're like
Yeah.
Italian, but they pick up kind of a wide variety of games
Yeah.
to publish, including like Aiden and
Aiden,
like
Death
Death
Stranding.
Stranding
Yeah.
and Control from Remedy,
Right. They're
or
pretty
at least certain
versatile
versions of
publisher.
it. So like
Yeah.
they're pretty like and their publishing efforts seem pretty good to me.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's not perfect, but
Did
like
they also do Bloodstained?
I think
yeah,
so.
they did
Yeah,
Bloodstained.
yeah.
Yeah. So, it's like they saw this game and reached out, had that communication, and were like, hey, we'll publish this. And a game like from a Chinese developer, I think they're Chinese,
Yeah, they are.
like probably might have difficulty like marketing over here. They could, and like 505 does a decent job, I think. So yeah, I just find that interesting. I don't know if I'm weird, but
Yeah.
I think the most unique aspect for me is like it's a game that takes place in the Ming Dynasty, which is
Oh,
kind of
yeah,
like
yeah.
not many games that take place. It's like if there was a Chinese game, it's always in the Free Kingdom or something like that, right? They never
Right.
talk about like the Ming Dynasty, right? Kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which is, I think that would be the thing that I would be looking forward to because there is some like brutal stuff that happens in that dynasty. So I want to see like this in action for those kind of purposes, right?
Yeah. I think it was just like a nice surprise showing. Like I had to like I forgot that was announced like in 2021. I just happened to like just by chance like search like was this game like known before? It's like oh no, it's not a new thing. So thank
Yeah,
you, Adam.
when I saw it, like when I saw the trailer, like I didn't recognize it, but when the logo popped up, I'm like Wuchang Fallen, whatever it was, like Fallen Feathers.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I that name sounds familiar. That I like. Did we cover this? Yes, we did years ago. Okay.
It's the same thing when I posted like where winds meet on like the staff chat. It's like I just discovered this cool trailer for this video game, and then I was like, all right, I posted like 3 years ago in like the
And yeah,
games talk.
they are a Chinese developer. I mean,
Yeah.
I assumed, but wanted to make sure. So
Yeah.
Like Adam's always on the case, like for anybody
I mean,
else.
yeah, no, yeah. Adam has a good nose for just like picking up new stuff.
I had two more news headlines here coming out of the Xbox showcase. There might be some smaller ones later, but these are the last two headliners. Starfield is getting a named DLC or expansion later this year called Starfield Shattered Space. We got a trailer for it. It takes place on like a derelict. I forget if it's a space station or like a moon base. It will somehow involve the Great Serpent, which is like some deity that some cultists that were stuck on a colony ship in the game like reference to, but was always kind of like off center stage. So I'm not surprised that that is the kind of where they're leaning into for their DLC story. They've also talked about how they're adding more additional, like if I remember right, and please correct me if I'm getting the details wrong here, but they had an update that was live during Summer Game Fest that added some like free update content.
Yeah.
And then they were talking about later they're going to have an additional update where they're partnering with community creators for additional things. And whenever
They added like a creation kit, I believe. Like I think like the big like they added new locations, gear, and bounties, and some custom content. But the big thing that they added to Starfield was like they have like an official creation kit now, that people have been going through. And then like people are like saying like, hey, if you want to get your feet wet like the Fallout 4 stuff first, like do that first, and then like you'll get a better grounding and understanding of like how the Starfield creation kit is, because a lot of like the language and like the way that you create stuff for Starfield is like done similarly through like what the Fallout 4 thing tools did. So you know. So
my personal take when I see like this news post about the incremental free updates, the expanded update. By the way, they said it's coming in 2024, no date on it.
Yeah.
I have circled on a little notepad like return to Starfield at some point because I played it last year, but I basically did like mainline it, like just the main story. And I'm like, I'll do a more thorough playthrough on New Game Plus at some point down the road. Whenever I see this, like, oh, I'll just wait till they're done poking at it and like done polishing it up, and then I'll replay it. So like, okay, whenever this comes out, maybe I'll jump back in, or I'll wait for all the other free updates and added bounties and quests to come out, and then I'll play it. As for like the trailer itself for this DLC, like it's there's not a lot to latch on to. There's like a distress signal, and you go there, and it somehow involves like these cultists. So you don't know what happened. You have to piece together. It's very, but like I hope it's good. I enjoyed my time with Starfield, and I do intend to revisit it once it's all put together so I can judge it.
Yeah. Maybe I'll give it another shot. I did relatively enjoy what I played, but the thing about the DLC that kind of annoys me is it's like there was all these hints to that, like the Great Serpent or whatnot in the base game. That was like the most interesting lore, and it's like, okay, so it's just not in there. You're saving it for the DLC, even though that's like the one hook that's actually got any sort of seasoning. It's like the
Yeah.
rest of the game is just bland, but that there's like some potential, and it's like, of course, it's the one they made the expansion. Of course.
But yeah, at some point later this year, and that's kind of a since we're kind of almost wrapping up a lot of the Xbox related things. That's kind of the through line is that we still didn't get a lot of dates. We did get a couple. This next one we did get a date, but a lot of this is just like we promise it's still this year. Or in Avowed's case, we had a date, but not really. So that's the one thing that I think is if I think the showing from Xbox's showcase was pretty good in terms of the game showed. Not perfect, like Fable we talked about. We wanted to see more, but there's still just not a lot of like, okay, I'm looking forward to playing this on this date or on this date.
It just has
that.
It also has like that the kind of like a distinct to it, right? Because you had like the three higher ups of like Spencer, Booty, and Bond like all show up in there, and like it was a very strong showing in terms of like the games like shown. But but it also comes off of like the heels of like the studio closures. So it's like people will cheer for it, but at the same time, it's like,
It's like a great showing, but at the same time, it's like people are gonna ask the questions like, why are these studios are still closed down, right? It's kind of what happened at the end of the day.
Exactly, because those three were obviously directly involved in the decision to close those studios. See, business is business, and business has to be done.
Yeah. So
So
at the very least, when we champion the
yeah,
games that we like, we can talk, about the studio that whose talent made those and put them
yeah,
together.
right.
And
We
we
do
had
have a staff chat that asks us like we should review the next Metal Gear game.
It's not an RPG, so
Yeah, it's not.
if they want to do a branching path on it, then go. They should do the legwork.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Last thing I have
Get the
here.
approval from Alex first.
Yeah.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
last thing I have here, we do actually have a date for this. We already knew that this expansion was coming out later this year. It is Diablo IV, Vessel of Hatred, is coming out on October 8th. It will introduce a new region. It is a direct story continuation. The trailer is basically Blizzard CG artists just flexing their muscles because
Yeah.
unless they showed something somewhere else that I didn't see, everything that was included in this press release, the trailer and the assets, is all just stills of a CG trailer, and the CG is very good, but that's all we got. And it's
Yeah, it's very
uh,
gruesome, and but
yeah.
the more formal reveal, like the new Spiritborn class reveal, will be like on July 18th, and a lot of
Okay.
I put like a URL to like the site, like that expands like more on like things that I'll like have in here, but it's not too much. A lot of the Diablo 4's improvements have been like in the last like patch. I hear like they did a lot of like end game loot stuff. Like that's in the right direction. It's not like a tip top shape yet, but much like how the Diablo 3 expansion kind of reinvigorated that, gave it a big way. I think maybe Vessel of Hatred might go in that direction. Where it'll reinvigorate a lot of like the pain points of that. So
So
we'll see.
when I
I'm
played a little bit of
interested.
Diablo 4 last year, it was during the vampire season, and I didn't really follow it past that. I didn't really play
That
it
was
that
that was no
much.
good. Yeah, yeah,
But like the most recent, or maybe not the most recent one, but one of the ones in the last year was they called it like Loot Reborn, which to me is a little bit on
yeah,
the nose. Like, yeah, this is a game about loot, and we made it good this time. Like, I don't know,
yeah.
but I don't have any direct experience with the Loot Reborn season, so maybe it was really good. But yeah, in the press release, and I guess I didn't catch that they were going to do a further showcase later in July on 18th, so that's good. They talk about obviously the new class, the Spiritborn. Um, Become one with the Spiritborn, embrace the ethereal spirits entwined with the ancient civilization. They are battle-hardened mystical synergies. So some sort of like spirit necromancer. We'll see. The CG is all about the character Neyrel, who is like a young woman who, at the very end of the original campaign, basically steals like a captured prime evil. I
Yeah,
don't want to spoil it too much.
like for all of like Diablo 4's faults, at least like the main story was like decent. It was okay.
Yeah.
It was serviceable. So
So
like when I
with
saw it, I was like, oh, I remember that character.
hmm Yeah, without spoiling, basically, there's this character that you're pretty sympathetic to throughout the game, and then she kind of does something that she doesn't explain at the very end, and it's not quite a cliffhanger, but it was very clearly like this. If they're going to continue the story, is what it would latch onto, and that's what the
Yeah.
CG directly does. So that's how it ties in. And then one of the game updates they talk about only in the press release, so we don't have a lot of details, is a mercenaries feature, which are basically some sort of NPCs or allies that can be uniquely equipped and join you if you're playing in single player. Of course, you can play in co-op. They do talk about a new co-op PvP mode. Uh, they mentioned slaying bosses in multi-level dungeons to get loot and rewards. I'm like, well, how is that any different? But we'll see how they tweak the co-op PvE in that game. But yeah, Vessel of Hatred coming out in early October.
Are you gonna play it, Brian?
I might just shotgun through the story. I won't. I'm not gonna do any season stuff, but I'll play through the story.
Yeah, I might think about it too.
That's exactly what I did with
Shout
Diablo 3.
out,
Like
shout out to not only Blizzard's like CG artists, but all CG artists.
Yeah,
yeah,
Like you did good work.
look, I'm not the biggest fan of like CG game reveals, but I won't deny like the incredible work that they do.
Mhm.
It always looks
I think
really good.
I think that's kind of like a 2000 thing, a millennial thing, where they show cool CGI trailers. I think these days people more care about the gameplay trailers.
I do value more. Like if you're gonna show something like we were just talking about the Expedition 33, it's like you can have like that CGI like showcase like for story cinematics, but at least show like what the game looks like in action too from like what the players are doing.
Well, to be clear, I guess shout out to all artists, not just artists who work on CG. I think some people don't realize how much of game
Yeah.
development
Oh
is
yeah.
literally like art,
Yes.
Yeah,
art
character
assets.
artists,
So
environmental artists,
environments, UI.
storyboards. There you go. Yeah, UI, great
Oh,
one. All right, so those we kind of are through all the heavy hitters. We have a handful, more than a handful.
There was
other
one last thing
trailers.
at Xbox that we did not cover.
Okay.
There is like an update to Fallout 76.
Oh,
We just didn't
Yeah.
cover it.
Look, yeah, I went through most of like I know I left out Fallout 76 and the Elder Scrolls Online stuff because
Well,
I was
Elder
like,
Scrolls we've already covered. That's out, like the new
okay,
expansion.
okay,
But yeah,
well, yeah,
there's a new Fallout Nuclear Wasteland. There's like the new expansion of the Skyline Valley.
yeah.
But yeah, it's hard for us to keep on top of all of these service games whenever they update. So
I
the thing
was
about
I was
Fallout
pretty much just
76,
like,
I played that game pretty religiously for a while, but after the Wastelanders update, they didn't really like add everything they added after that was very like piecemeal. It was like
yeah,
here's a
we
door.
that's why we stopped covering it because it felt like it was winding down, and then
Yeah,
because of the new show, like they finally made another sort of expansion to it. So
maybe I'll reboot it, but I was playing it back when it was on the Bethesda launcher, which doesn't exist anymore. That's how long it's been. So if I can get my account wrangled over to Steam somehow, maybe I'll play the new expansion, but we'll see. So we're already 2 hours plus into the podcast, and we have a lot to go through. So from this point forward, we're probably just going to do more of a wide scope, but not going into any individual thing as deep. And then over the next couple of weeks, we might go into these individually as they crop up, as the marketing cycles for these individual games continue. For indies, I do want to shout out that, Adam, you put together a pretty fun listicle for a handful of indies that you were able to see at Summer Games Fest. You shout out 5 of them here. Now, I wish we had unlimited time to dig into all of these with equal, importance across the board. But can you highlight like what were your 2 or 3 most favorite indies that you're able to see, whether they were championed on your list that you published or not at Summer Games
okay,
Fest?
I'll go quick.
Okay.
So I saw a handful of games at the indie showcase at Summer Games Fest, and there was a couple of different indie groups there. And so I wrote up basically a preview listicle of 5 of the ones I saw. 4 of them are RPGs, and one of them is not, but it's the one that's not is actually still a really, really interesting game. So I'll be quick here. Fera the Sundered Tribes. This is developed by Massive Damage Games, and they were the developer behind Star Renegade, which is a game I reviewed a couple of years ago. That was a really turn-based pixel art graphic sort of game. This is
Super
very
pretty.
different. This is 3D. This is at a glance, it looks like an indie Monster Hunter. But my main takeaway with Fera the Sundered Tribes is that it's more than just Monster Hunter. It's like Monster Hunter plus Colony Sim, and that you're building like a village. And as you like defeat monsters and collect resources and things like that, you actually are like building new buildings and like outposts and things like that for your village. And then you have like a group of villagers that you basically command to do certain things, sort of like a colony sim or like even like an RTS where they're like you have villagers that are always working on something. They help you collect, resources, or they help you build your armor and your weapons. And so there's that, and then also there's a really big component of this game is this sort of aerial combat or aerial navigation where your home base is up on a cliff and you jump off and then you basically get on your glider, and gliding around this place, it actually requires a little bit of familiarity and skill with the controls. You have your glider and then you have like your tether that's attached to your arm. And it was kind of funny when I watched the developer play it. He was like really smooth, flinging all over the place, flying around, really really skillful, and here I am like floundering and crashing into cliff sides. So it takes a little bit of getting used to like the movement, but sort of the skill there. But basically, that was my takeaways. This game is not just like a Monster Hunter like. It's sort of this combination of like Monster Hunter, Colony Sim, aerial combat game. It's the game. The kit I saw was really early. It's coming out for like early access later this year, and it's coming to all platforms later. It's one of those things that like if it comes together, it could be pretty cool, but also it may not come together at all. I don't know. That's the cynical way to look at it. But it's definitely ambitious. It's very ambitious. It's not just here's our take on Monster Hunter. They have a couple of ideas that they're trying to get to here. The next game I saw, or I wanted to talk about, was Robots at Midnight. This is developed by Finish Line Games. They've released a few games that I had heard of, like Maze, which I think is like an adventure game, as well as some other games called Scully and Cell Damage HD. And Robots at Midnight, like when I look at it, I'm like, is this a Souls-like? And then when they introduce it to me, they're like, this is a Souls-like. So that's what they call it, not me. And so it's a Souls-like game, but basically the way they put it was that like a lot of Souls-like games are kind of grim, dark, kind of gruesome, kind of, moody. And this was meant to not be that. This was meant to be more like adventurous and literally like an 80s style, like intentionally 80s. You play as a young woman named Zoe, who kind of comes in a Saiyan pod, crash lands on this planet full of robots, and you don't know what's going on, like why she's there and who these robots are and what's up with this planet. And kind of like a Souls-like game, based on what I saw, it's not very outward narrative. It's more just like, you're on this planet now, figure it out. And so you're running around. You have a little like weapon that can be, I think the one I had in a demo was like a wrench. But you have like a sort of a club-like weapon, and then you have like a fist on your left hand. So you have heavy attack, light attack, pretty normal stuff. Something maybe a little bit different is that in addition to your kind of your main hand attacks, you have this sort of like extra meter on your side hand, which is called your mitt. And then there's this system in the game where at nighttime the enemies respawn. Which is sort of similar to like a Souls-ish, respawn mechanic, I guess. I didn't get a whole lot of time with this game, but it seems to be just sort of like a cartoony, colorful Souls-like game. It sort of reminds me of Asterigos, but maybe not as like smaller scope than that. But something to keep an eye on. It's really hard to get really more into it than that. That was Robots at Midnight. Let's see. Next game was Sky of Tides. Now, this is a game from a studio in Montreal that is actually more known for like television and VR stuff. They have done one game before, but this is like their like first major like game release here. And Sky of Tides, again, when I look at it, I'm like, this looks like Disco Elysium. And then they say like, this is sort of like Disco Elysium. I'm like, okay, you said it, not me. And so it's like a narrative game with no combat, with an isometric style. The most interesting part about Sky of Tides is the setting. You're basically on a world of Newman, I think is the world's name, and then it like explodes, and the world is now split into 9 different islands in space with like the ocean in between them, hence Sky of Tides. And basically, this power that split up the world is being sought after by a couple of different factions. Your main character, Rin, is the daughter of a researcher of one of the factions called the Syndicate, which the way I sort of gathered it is the Syndicate's actually the evil faction that's trying to use the power for nefarious things. And then there's another faction called, I don't remember, Sovereign. And that stuff was actually a little bit more interesting to me, like the story setup and maybe the approach there. Where I was a little bit more uncertain on this was the main mechanic of the game is like, it's like social stats, sort of like Disco Elysium or maybe a Persona. But they said the main goal of the game is to like balance your stats as much as possible. And like if they're not balanced quite right, you could fall into like a bad ending and have to like, kind of like rewind and do part of the game again. I was kind of uncertain on that. Like that's the main hook here, is to like have a balanced stat loadout rather than actually having like choice and consequence, like a role playing game.
I kind of like that as a hook, but maybe not the main hook.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. But anyways, like good premise. It looks nice. Kind of sort of like a lot of purples and blues and oranges, and it's like in its art. There's also like a small little like TV show that is coming along with the game. That's sort of like this Canadian CG thing. It's in the trailer if you care to see it. But this game is a game I'm more like the narrative stuff is more interesting than the gameplay stuff than what I saw. From what I saw, 2 more here. Happy Bastards. This one was actually just announced. These other games have kind of been like floating around for a while. Like they've been like public projects. This one was actually just announced from Clever Plays. Who their previous game was Operation Tango, which I've heard about but know
Great
nothing
game.
about.
I love
You played it?
Tango. Yeah, my friend and I played it.
Okay. So Happy Bastards, this one was clearly the farthest out in that I didn't go. The other games I actually played, this one I didn't. It was more like a presentation. It wasn't ready for hands-on. And it seemed like it was sort of a last-minute addition. So the whole idea of this game is like a tactical RPG, but it's meant to be like a very parody world. And one of the first things the developer told me was that like in a lot of RPGs that have like choices, a lot of times people like to play as the good guy, and it's almost like rewarded to play as the good guy, and barely anyone wants to be evil or bad. In this game, there is no like good guy. You're all a bunch of bastards. You're all assholes. And like it's just a very like parody kind of scummy. I'm trying to remember the wording they used here. A morally bankrupt campaign. So just do whatever you need to like power up your units and to gain wealth and fame and EXP in this sort of roguelike tactical RPG. He basically said also that in a lot of tactical RPGs, you play the hand of God, where your units that you control do whatever you tell them to, like no faults. Like they'll just do exactly what you tell them to. In this game, your units may not do exactly what you tell them to. They have their own little personalities and quirks to them. So a part of the strategy is sort of like managing that and using those to your advantage. Like sometimes you might have a character who's like might be like a hothead or a berserker where he'll just attack whatever's in front of him. So you want to use him in that way, but like he can be reckless. Or you might have characters that fight with each other, so you don't want them to work together because they might attack each other instead. They're a bunch of bastards. And he said like the game is not really like a campaign or a narrative, but it's more just like going on these little quests to get stronger and stronger and get better equipment and loot and stats and whatnot. So it was hard for me to kind of grasp what like the larger structure of the game is, but that's kind of the idea is that you just have a bunch of like idiots who you're working with. And if you are trying to get as strong as possible, trying to get as much money and fame and wealth as possible, and if you have to sell a baby to a mercenary to do that, then so be it. That's just the type of game it is.
I'm really interested in this game because I really like the Operation Tango. So I'm always curious. I'm curious to see what the developers are doing.
The trailer
Sorry
looks.
to
Go ahead, James.
sorry to be so random, but I actually need to hop out a little bit early. Inside Baseball, I've been like reviewing the new Destiny 2 expansion, and I actually needed to find a group to do the raid. So,
Oh, okay. So you have to raid right now.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no
No
problem.
worries.
They're-
See you,
Yeah,
James.
see ya.
I was saying that in the little reveal trailer for Happy Bastards, it's a very short snippet of gameplay at about the 20-second mark, but it reminds me of War Tales a little bit. They're just like a complete opposite game, but same like no central narrative, just like little quests that are kind of like generically strung to, not generically, but just like geographically located in a similar region of the world. I have no idea if Happy Bastards plays a lot like War Tales, but from the little snippet of gameplay, I made the comparison visually.
Okay, so that is Fera, Sky of Tide, Robots at Midnight, and Happy Bastards. The last game on here is not an RPG, but I think it's one that a lot of people have shown interest in. It's Afterlove EP. This game, like, it. How do I put this? It stood out on the show floor due to its art style. You know, it's a 2D game with art by so this is Afterlove EP. It's a game from an Indonesian studio made completely by Indonesian artists. And the artist for the game, I wrote it down here. 1 second. Soyatu. It's got this sort of like doodle manga style, and I mean doodle in like the most affectionate, endearing way possible, where it feels like something you could have drew in like a scrapbook or whatnot, or you know, kind of like a manga. And the premise of this game, if you haven't heard of it, is you play as a character named Rama, who is a young musician, and his girlfriend is Sinta, but his girlfriend passes away. And ever since his girlfriend passes away, he has gone into a slump. His relationships are failing, he's not taking care of himself, and his music is like the last thing on his mind. And if you haven't heard about the story behind this game, the creator, like the person who was the original creator of this game, is Mohammed Fahmy Hasni, who is known as the writer behind Coffee Talk from Toad Productions, which is a really well-liked game. I haven't played it myself, but everyone I know who's played Coffee Talk really, really likes it. I think it's got an overwhelming positive rating on Steam. It's a very heartfelt game about like characters and relationships. And he passed away a couple of years ago. And it's kind of unfortunately fitting that this game, which is a game about moving on after a loved one's death, is literally being made in the shadow of a loved one, like the creator of the game, who's no longer around.
Mhm.
So that's kind of unfortunately poetic in this sense. So you play as Rama, and basically at the early parts of the game, he starts hearing Cinta, his past girlfriend, in his head talking to him. And he doesn't know, like, is she a spirit? Am I just hearing things? Am I losing it? And she basically starts to like nudge him, like, get out there, see what your friends are doing. What do they talk to them? Rekindle your relationships with them. And the game is like an adventure game where you're walking around Jakarta. It's set in Jakarta, which is the capital of Indonesia. And you're meeting different characters that some of them are a part of his band, I think. Some of them are not. I didn't get the full picture, but a lot of them are like concerned about Rama, the main character, because of his situation. And he's been kind of hiding himself and, not very social. And it was just a game that it's very slow paced. The music is from an Indonesian band. It's kind of like this alternative pop, alternative rock, electronic kind of music that suits the mood very well. And in my demo of the game, I was meeting a character named Regina, who is like a model, or she's trying to be a model. And she has her like own kind of relationship problems that she's going through. And the part that kind of stuck out to me was that like you could tell that she wasn't quite right either, or she was maybe upset or maybe a little bit annoyed, but it was hard to tell exactly like her stance. And so like me role playing as Rama in a sense, like you do get dialogue choices, but I wanted to like be considerate of this other character without like pushing my boundaries.
Right.
But that was kind of the whole vibe of this game. It's all about like moving on, rekindling relationships. The way they put it in the press release is like learning to love yourself again and potentially building a new romance, possibly. And so like there's a lot of heart behind this game. You can just see it, you can feel it. And that's one reason why I wanted to cover it, even though it doesn't quite fit our scope. There is a demo on Steam. And it looks really nice. It looks great. It's got that manga doodle style. So that is Afterlove EP from I forget the studio name, but it's Indonesian studio, Indonesian adventure game. So definitely something that I've seen a lot of people interested in.
This is from
So-
apologies if I butchered the pronunciation. Pixelnesia.
Yeah, and that is basically the studio created by the Mohammed Fahmy before he passed away. So I saw a lot of people interested in this game.
Yeah, that's
It's like overwhelming positive from Steam. Like from the premise that you gave me, is like this sounds very interesting.
yeah,
hmm
it's pretty good.
So I
Well,
wanted to
thank you for
highlight that
covering
one
that.
too, even though it quite fits our scope. So
And then, of course, we
Uh,
cannot possibly
I
talk
think
about every single indie available at the show. The creators of Chris Tales had a new indie called Prisma. They got a launch trailer. We have
There's not a
another.
launch trailer. They're gonna do a Kickstarter in the near future. It wasn't a
Yeah,
launch
I guess.
trailer.
Gotcha.
a Kickstarter launch trailer.
There you go. We have another like 16-bit inspired like JRPG inspired indie game called Beloved Rapture, which is a game that is specifically trying to explore themes such as like trauma and LGBT themes.
It seems to have a male-male romance. I don't know if I'm looking into that, but it's like you don't see that very often, especially in this
Mhm.
space. That's interesting.
Is that
Well,
not? It's like
What's
I
that?
was just thinking like the
Rapture?
word rapture. I was thinking, is that not that? Was it leaving Rapture? Is that?
No,
I don't
there's
think this is
something.
related.
It
No.
is not related.
Yeah,
It's
it's
called
not the
Beloved Rapture.
not the Christian Rapture, capital R Rapture.
Yeah.
The studio is Rapturous Studio, so kind of self-titled in a way. But yeah, I can understand the premise of this is a game inspired by games of their childhood, but touching on themes that games of their childhood may not have explicitly touched. So this is kind of a passion project, seemingly in that vein. So we got an announcement.
One last indie game. I mean, the Beloved Rapture. It wasn't. I think there was like a trailer, but I don't know if it was actually on like the Guerrilla Collective showcase floor or not. But anyways, like that one was interesting because it's basically like the way he put it on the Kickstarter was this person who created it loved RPGs, JRPGs at the time, but felt like it didn't really represent him. And so this is really focusing on the way he puts it is trauma, friendship, and LGBT themes. So, you know, that's basically the emphasis behind creating this game. And also, this game has been like in development for a long time. There was originally a Kickstarter in 2014, back when it was an RPG Maker game, and then like partway in development, they actually decided we're going to reboot it as like just like a ground up game that they're making, rather than RPG Maker. So it's been 10 years since they started this, and a lot of indie games I know are similar in that they're like lifelong passion projects. That's basically what this is. But switching gears a little bit, one last indie-ish game that I saw, just worth a mention, is UFO 50. Have you heard of it?
Oh yes, I've been waiting for this. Yes.
So this is from Mossmouth, which is the developer behind Splunky, and I got to demo this as well. I didn't write about it, but it is 50. It's basically like pretend there was a developer called like UFO Soft back in the late 80s, or maybe even late 70s, 80s and 90s, making a bunch of games, and then they're like, this is our greatest hits collection of UFO Soft's 50 classic games. Like, to be clear, none of these games are like
but
real games, but now they
yeah.
are. So
and they're
like,
all made by different developers, right? Or different creators, like the 50
I
games.
think so, or some of
Yeah.
them. But
Yeah.
like, it's basically this fake company called UFO Soft, and I got to play some of the games in this 50 game collection. And there's one that's basically like, here's our take on Dragon Quest or Final Fantasy, like
Probably.
like the very first one there.
Uh-huh.
And it looks the part, it feels the part. It's set in like the Wild West, the one that I saw, or at least had like cowboy characters anyway.
Okay.
And so like it's literally like an NES type game, picking up party members in town and leaving town, and you get into battle, and it looks like classic like Final Fantasy 1. And it was like seemed fully fledged in like this sort of micro game. They didn't like it being called a micro game, but that's what I'm gonna call it. Um, and then there's another game that was very much like the original Phantasy Star, and that you're
Okay.
crawling through a dungeon in first person. It was like that, but it was like a real time blobber though, in that you're actually attacking like first person real time these
That's
bats and
funny.
slimes that you're fighting.
Yeah.
And then there was another game that was RPG ish that was sort of like the game that came to mind for me was Echo the Dolphin, where you're underwater and kind of side scrolling. You have to like get through certain sections of the water before you need to breathe again, and there's some sorts of like battles that you get into while you're underwater. But that was really interesting because it's just like 50 games in one. They're all
Yeah.
like totally different styles.
I'm
don't
really
know.
looking forward to that. I know I got a release date. I forgot what it was, but I'm just
Oh, it
glad that it's
does.
coming out soon. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like it's been in development for like forever.
yeah. I think I had heard of it before, but I don't know. When I saw it on the show floor, I was like, "What is that?"
September
I wanna see it.
18.
Okay.
And then, of course, we also got a bunch of trailers throughout the whole weekend and week for previously announced games. We talked about this game pretty significantly and at length when it was announced, but we did get a new gameplay look in for Assassin's Creed Shadows. And the most interesting thing about this trailer, I think, is that this trailer shows about equal stage presence for both of the protagonists, both Yasuke the samurai and Naoe the ninja, which for Assassin's Creed is not how they've always operated. Remember when for Assassin's Creed Odyssey, they almost always showed Alexios and not Cassandra? And then for like other ones, there was a whole thing about, well, women are hard to animate sort of thing. It just feels like it's good to see this trailer really show both protagonists on equal footing because they both seem cool as hell.
Yeah,
That was
I think
my
the gameplay
off the cuff takeaway
the,
from it.
the gameplay is okay. I mean, I think it's hard to get like a good sense for it without like the progression trees of like how
Yeah.
they're both different. Like it looks okay. I think the weirdest part is like they talk about like this commitment to like historical accuracy in Japan, and they like kind of really botch it on really basic stuff. That like might not be like immediately present to like to the Western people, but like for example, it's like they're showing cherry blossom season in Japan, but then for some reason there's like ripe persimmons in the yeah. Chow already knows right away. He's like, wait, what? It's like oh, you might as well have like snowmen out there too while you're at it. It's just totally like mismatched seasons of what you're portraying pretty much in that. But just like very, very basic stuff. If you're setting a game in Japan, it's like, oh, if you're showing this and that's like a really rudimentary error that you're doing right away, it's like I really wonder what the commitment to accuracy is here then in terms of that kind of stuff. Which is like it's I for details like that, obviously it won't really have much of a big impact on like the actual minute by minute gameplay. But in terms of, like if you're interested in like, oh, how did they pick this time period, and then they kind of make a very stupid error like that, it's like, oh, okay, I guess they're not really taking this setting seriously in that sense, right? Which is kind of weird. Hopefully that was just like, just a old build type of thing, and they have it corrected. But if not, then that's gonna be really funny to see how what the final part will look like. It kind of
Correct.
just makes
Yeah,
them
they keep
it,
it in.
it makes
So
it just makes them look like clowns then, to be honest. So, it's really interesting to see that. What were you gonna say, Chow?
I was gonna say, I'd rather just have them like keep it in so people can clown on them. And it's like
No,
you're not historic accurate. You're like,
yeah, I mean, it's like that was really funny to see because I was like, wait a minute, what is going on? So yeah, other than that, I mean, well, we'll see. I'm interested in playing the game for sure. I don't know if I'm gonna like 100% it. I don't think I will. But I'm interested in checking it out for sure.
We got a new trailer for the long dormant but recently resurfaced Metal Slug Tactics. Still no explicit release window, but this gameplay trailer is finally an extended look at the game. It's 6 minutes of basically just pure gameplay, going through how the grids work, how the character creator work, not character creator, but the character like progression works. It's basically like just the game, like 6 minutes of raw footage from the game,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is
So there's like a demo up on Steam that's up for a few more days as of the time of this recording. But I think the main thing that people might get slipped up with this game is like there's like a roguelike progression in this game. So it's kind of like there's some elements like Into the Breach, like in terms like choosing like a route in your map and like getting bonuses on like stage, um, what stages you decide to do and stuff like that. But I think it's like it looks to be a pretty solid game. I haven't been able to try the demo because I've been busy with a lot of stuff this week. But everything I've heard from people who've tried it say they've had pretty positive things to say about it.
these next two trailers are trailers for games that I don't know very well. I'll just take that outright. The first one is for a game called Exodus, and this trailer is entirely CG. So after watching it, I still didn't feel like I knew much about it. And I guess we just talking about CG trailers. Like CG is good, but I don't know what sort of game this is. It's basically a new planet called Centauri. The characters fled a dying Earth, so hence the name Exodus. And then
This is the game announced by Matthew McConaughey at the
I was gonna
Game
ask
Awards.
that. Yeah, I was
Oh,
That's
like,
I
like the
didn't
only
actually
thing
watch
people
the
remember
stream.
about this game.
pretty much. Yeah,
So,
I was gonna ask this
This is
McConaughey.
basically like X. So the Archetype Entertainment, I'm pretty sure, is based in Texas, and I think it's like X Mass Effect people making a not Mass Effect game.
All
So
right. Well, we love Mass Effect.
yeah. Anyways, yeah, the new trailer is basically all CG. It's basically like interstellar explorers looking for a new habitable planet to replace Earth and are not having success.
It will be
So
cool
yeah,
when they show gameplay of this game.
the debut trailer shows some like that they revealed at the Game Awards.
Barely
Like,
remember. Was it
I
actually like
mean, not
gameplay
a
or like
lot,
oh
or like at
more?
least like faux gameplay. It looks like Mass Effect. So maybe, yeah.
this next game is another game that can sometimes get lost in the crowd. It is Relic, the First Guardian. It is a Souls-like set in an apocalyptic fantasy world. Let me know if you've heard that before. But this one at least has one hook that I can latch onto that the developers have stated and shown, is that we got a gameplay trailer, we got an announcement trailer. This was at the Future Game Show. But they did also discuss that it has no level-based progression. Everything is based on runes and upgrading equipment, which is like, oh, okay, so maybe more Zelda-ish, or specifically more focus on the weapon system upgrade of like a Dark Souls 3 or a Bloodborne. So at least there's that, where there's no like soul level or anything like that. So there's no EXP in that sense. It's all materials and upgrades and runes. So for Relic, the First Guardian, at least it has something that I can latch onto to say, oh, that actually seems a little bit different. Something that gives this thing a bit of an identity of its own. No release window other than 2025. The gameplay reveal that we did get is pretty lengthy, 6 minutes of gameplay. You see a couple mimics, you see a couple like trolls, a little bit of interaction with NPCs, which is always kind of fun to see because that is a part of these games that sometimes isn't shown in trailers. But other than that, it's a post-apocalyptic Souls-like. And then we also got a trailer. I think this was after a lot of the Summer Games Fest. I'm not sure. This was a trailer for Citizen Sleeper 2 Starward Vector. It will launch in early 2025, and we got a gameplay reveal trailer for it. And Citizen Sleeper 1 was a game that I had circled but never got around to. Josh, did you play Citizen Sleeper?
Yeah, I played the shit out of it. It was great. Loved it.
So-
I saw the gameplay trailer for this one. It looks like a lot more. Like if you played Citizen Sleeper 1, a lot of this is you're very familiar with, like, your actions are dictated by the dice rolls that you're given for the day. So your what you can engage in is based on, like, what the result of your die rolls were, and you can choose to do whatever you can with those die rolls for the day. There's like some element of, like, multiple characters like engaging in, like, actions in this game, while the first game was like very much a solo endeavor. This one has like more emphasis on like having crew members and some sort of like ship management going on, which interests me. I haven't really looked too deep into it. I think it's just one of those games that I'm just gonna hop in and just enjoy it for what it is. Like, I really enjoyed the first one a lot, so I'm really excited to see what this new one has.
And I will say that covers it for news, but there was we could not cover absolutely everything, but that covers all the highlights. So that was a monstrous effort by Josh covering it on the site, James and Adam covering it at the event. It's been a busy 2 weeks, and of course, we still have the Nintendo Direct coming at some point this month. They said so themselves, so that will probably come up within the next week or two. So it won't slow down. We've got Elden Ring coming up next week with the Shadow of the Erdtree expansion. And then speaking of, Bandai Namco has announced that Elden Ring has surpassed 25 million units sold, which is insane compared to like Dark Souls 3, I think, set the high watermark when it released in 2015, and it was like 10 million. So just the trajectory has been exponential, like literally, in terms of the From Software reach. And then for the rest of the podcast, we just have a couple dates to go through as we normally would, because obviously we got a lot of release dates, a lot of demos that are live right now on Steam as we record. So we'll kind of just go through these in what I believe I have set as chronological order. First one is that Scars of Mars, which was set to release on June 20th. We did learn, I guess this is not in chronological order. Never mind. Scars of Mars is also going to get a Switch release on June 20th, in addition to its PC release. This is the sci-fi first-person blobber.
It's kind
Sacrifice.
of weird. The fact that they just announced a Switch version like literally a week before launch is kind of strange, but sure, why not?
Sacrifice. This is a game that we've covered a few times on the podcast. It has a public playtest now. IGN had a gameplay look in. I think we mentioned that in passing last week on the podcast, but it has a public playtest now. That's the same gameplay window that we saw in that IGN initial look in. We're recording this on the 15th. On the 19th of June, the survival action RPG First Dwarf is entering Steam Early Access, so that will also be playable. Basically, there's a ton of cool shit playable on Steam, whether it's a demo or an early access. And luckily, we've had Josh that has had a chance to look in at a few of those, like Keylocker a couple weeks ago. But First Dwarf will be available to play on June 19th. Going into a release date, a game that we mentioned in passing a while back, Flintlock: The Siege of Dawn. This is a game that we've kind of been covering piecemeal ever since its announcement way back in 2022. I guess not that far ago. Flintlock: The Siege of Dawn is going to release on July 18th.
I've been it's been interesting seeing like the ad campaign of this game kind of evolve and like take on this like black and white cinematography style with their recent trailers. I don't know if you've noticed this.
I
Adam,
noticed
like
it on the thumbnail.
yeah, like the way that they kind of evoke like certain film trailers, like of like it's like a black background, big white text. When they showcase their trailers, like evoking a certain sort of like black and white, almost Western style sort of like marketing campaign for their recent ads. It's been interesting because I think this game, like the early ads and trailers for this game haven't really shown like the personality of this game, while recent ad efforts for this game have like been very more distinctive visually. So it's been interesting seeing that.
Yeah,
It's just
so this is a game from the developers behind Ashen.
Mhm.
They're Australian, I believe. And published by Kepler Interactive, which is London and Singapore, as we learned earlier. And I've heard it being described as like a mix between a Souls-like and God of War. So
okay,
I'm curious about it. I'm
yeah.
curious.
And
Maybe it's good, maybe it's not. I don't know.
the new recent news about this game that like they kind of subtly did not say is like the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One versions of this game have been canceled. It seems like they're no longer on the release platform
Oh,
lineup.
okay.
So it's PS5, Xbox Series, and PC, with no PS4 and Xbox One versions.
Another demo is coming out next month. This is for the RPG Escape from Ever After. I don't remember covering this game before, but it looks very much like a fan tribute to Paper Mario in terms of how the combat and world exploration works. With
You
a
might
lot of
know the
very
game under its previous name, which is Flint Buckler Wakes the Sleepy Castle. No?
and, yeah,
Yep.
now
Anyways, yeah,
known
this
as
is like
Escape from Ever After.
yeah. Anyways, yeah, this is like Paper Mario-ish, adventure-ish, RPG-ish game-ish.
Mhm. Demo on
Yeah.
July 19th. Here's one that we covered, I think, back in like March, January.
Yeah,
This
that was some months ago.
yeah, Sword of Convalaria. This is a game that at its surface looks like a 16-bit JRPG inspired indie project, which it is, but it's also a free-to-play game. So that's kind of an interesting juxtaposition there. At the time, I don't think we knew exactly how the free-to-play portion would work. I don't know if that's been detailed since. I remember we kind
They're
of
kind
like
of so they did like in the previous when they announced a playable demo during Steam Next Fest back in like the news story came out like around January, and then they held that demo during early February. So there's like two modes to it. There's like this Spiral of Destinies mode and Elysium. Spiral of Destinies is a standalone single player tactics RPG journey that has multiple endings, roguelike elements, and is completely separate from any monetization. And the Elysium mode is the dynamic online mode with all the monetization. And all the revenue gained from the monetization of the Elysium mode feeds into the content development of the Spiral of Destiny single player mode. That's how they described it when they're showcasing the game. So it is a pretty interesting structure that they have. I don't know exactly how it'll pan out in the full game. Hopefully, it does well. Um, it's initially going to be launching for Steam and mobile devices, but they did say that a Nintendo Switch version is in development. And they hope to release it on other platforms in the future. So there is. So I do want to check out like this game is like single player mode that's like away from any of the monetization. See how that experience is.
it's like the
Um,
Saga Reuniverse model, but within the same game. We'll just have the tail wagging the dog within the same project.
yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe. So hopefully it's cool. I like strategy RPGs. I'm always up for a strategy RPG.
Here's a pretty big one, and this is a game that there were rumors floating that it might have been delayed, but Visions of Mana, of course, the newest original single player title in the Mana series in a while that wasn't a remaster, will be releasing on August 29th. And alongside the announcement of a release date, we got a pretty significant little release date reveal gameplay trailer introducing the whole cast of characters, talking about the class and the elemental system as well, English
That
voice
asshole
actors
bunny
as
is
well.
back.
The asshole bunny is back.
The asshole bunny.
That's right.
Castle Bunny. Nicholas, is it?
Yeah, Niccolo.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's actually really interesting to me in that. So this trailer, if you're a couple of months ago, there's actually like a Japanese press release that introduced 2 of the new characters, Karina and I think we said Morley at the time, or Mortria. And what was sort of weird is that they never released that like press release in English. So that was a little bit strange in that they kind of introduced some characters for like the Japanese market, but not for us. So Kite actually translated it at the time, but now they're actually introducing in English like the full character cast. So you have Val, who's your main character. You have Karina and Morley, who are the characters that were sort of introduced before, and then the last 2 characters are Palomina, who is like a princess, and Jule, who's like this little sprite boy guy. And they introduced some of the new like class systems or classes for those characters. The way the class system works in this game is there's like a different item for each of the elemental spirits, and it seems like for each of those there's like a different class for each. So that's like 8 classes per character. But also this trailer, what I wanted to get to really was it shows a lot of like classic mana characters or creatures. Like it shows Flammy. Everyone loves Flammy.
Everyone loves Flammy.
It shows Vuskaboo or Vuskav, depending on who you ask. The turtle with like goggles or whatever.
Yup.
He is from Trials of Mana or Second and Setsu 3. So he's around. It shows a little cactus or Cactus Coon or whatever his name is. He's like he's sort of a mascot. He'll probably be popping up under some certain places, and you have to collect him. Probably what it is. Just like Trials of Mana. But one thing that was they showed Nicolo, who is from Legend of Mana, and that's like the only game he's in. I wouldn't really have considered him like a mascot.
Kind of thing. I think he was in the remake of Sword of
Sword of Mana. Who cares about Sword of Mana?
I think when the main character like fell off from the waterfall, and then he kind of fished him out.
You have a great memory.
Yeah.
It's Sword of Mana. I do not remember.
You're like along some primordial memories. I'm like, oh yeah, he did show in Sword of Mana. God damn it, Cha.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting Nicolo.
Yeah, for sure.
I call him an asshole because he's like a merchant in Legend of Mana. I remember this. He's like sort of a scumbag, and he's like all about profits and like who cares about anything else.
Yeah,
he's kind of a jerk. Yeah, like an uber capitalist, like looking out for only number one here. But yeah, they also show a Dud Bear. Dub.
Yeah.
Dub.
They also show off like besides like your 5 main playable characters, there'll be like support characters, like obviously like the main girl.
Hina is one.
Hina.
Yeah, she's like the main heroine. That's actually sort of interesting in that like she's like the main heroine of the game, but she's a support character.
Yeah,
right.
And then there's 2 others. Ramko, which is like it's like a fairy almost.
Oh yeah, character. That's Karina's mini Flammy.
Yeah, right. Mini Flammy. And Aish, which is like some sort of scholar, I believe.
I probably need to check out this trailer. I did not watch this trailer at all, and I bought the collector's edition because it has a soundtrack, art book, a Flammy plushie.
You're already sold.
Yeah, I mean, you don't need to watch the trailer. You already gave them their money.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting like screenshots I didn't see much is like there's this elemental plot. Did you see this screenshot, Adam? Where it's like it shows you like elementals and like a whole list of like their fucking skills by them. Yeah.
So there's 8 elementals in the like mana. There's 8 mana elements, and there's like a class for each of them, as far as I understand. But I wonder how that like works.
Yeah.
In terms of like you level them up each separately for each character.
And like some of them have like utility. Like one of them has like a shovel. Like the Earth Elemental has like a shovel icon. Oh, are there like context actions per class as well? I don't know. So it looks. I can't wait to play it, man. It looks so good. I was really impressed by this trailer. I'm like, oh, it looks so nice. I can't wait.
Also, the Western box art did Angry Kirby for the protagonists.
Yes. Yeah, the Western box art, like you have Val, his sword is raised, ready for battle. But everyone still has the same. Everyone still has like the same pose and stance at both versions. It's just except Val's stance. It's like in that one, he's like all battle ready in the Western version, and in the Eastern version, the Japanese version, he's just like all looking up, more like almost sorrowfully up at the players. He's like ready to like protect Mamoru. It's like okay, Okay. Oddly enough,
at
I think
least-
at least the Western version feels like the more fitting because everyone's like is all ready for battle, including him. While in the Japanese version, everyone's ready for battle except him. He's just like, oh, what's going on?
At
Oh
least
yeah,
it's the same art style and
oh
not
yeah,
like Nier Automata or Nier
oh
Replicant, where
yeah.
they just
Oh, I
completely
can't stand those
destroyed the art
American
style.
covers.
Those are
Uh,
so funny. Yeah, it's still funny. Like this, like why did you do this?
I feel like they're in that approach. Maybe they just think that Western audience just don't like those kind of covers or something. I don't know.
I guess that's so funny. I thought we were just like we moved past on.
Yeah,
We moved
I
past
thought
it.
we passed on. I mean, my
Mm.
biggest gripes was like one of the covers that they did was like Breath of Fire free, like the US cover for that. It felt like they like it's like somebody never played it and it's like fire, breath. Okay, let's just put a fire in the background and put
I mean,
Breath of Fire.
that's probably true to life from back then.
A couple of those classic covers are always fun, like the original Suikoden.
Yeah, those people look nothing like their character art.
Nope.
Yeah, give me it. You know what sucks though? When I saw this August 29 release date, I'm
Oh
like,
yeah,
what does that remind
are you
me
gonna
of?
play this or Gundam?
I'm
When
hoping
does Gundam come out?
I'm hoping Gundam. Yeah, Gundam comes out on 29th, so hopefully we get Coden before the releases, and then I can play through that, and then on release I can play through this. Don't make me choose. I don't want to choose.
What if you end up reviewing Black Myth Wukong instead?
Well, wait, is
Like
that?
That's like the week before.
Oh
So
man. Wait, well, but that'll be already done because that's already like would be
yeah,
the
a whole
week
week.
before.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be the
Okay.
week before, so it wouldn't be that bad. Man, I don't know. There's too many games.
We covered this, I think, last week or the week before. Demon School. We had a new trailer earlier that was going into the characters. We also now have a release date for Demon School. This is now launching on September 13th.
Another game
So
I
that's-
really want to play. This game, when I got hands on it, it seemed really cool. Everything I've seen of this game seems really cool. I want to play it.
They're definitely on marketing peak right now because the earlier trailer was called Meet the Students, and then they have a boss mechanics trailer, and then the release date announcement trailer. So they're like really trying to get out.
Yeah,
of this
I mean, yeah, there's peak indie game strategy during SGF, right? Because it's like different
Show up in every
trailers.
stream.
Yeah,
Yep.
pretty much. So
Like we're in the Guerrilla Collective stream, we're in the IGN stream, we're in the Future Game Show stream. We're just all over the place.
yeah, so that is
and, no,
peak
and
indie
we're
game.
not besmirching it. Do what you gotta.
Yeah,
Hey, yeah.
Look, it never hurts to have more advertising. Like it worked for fucking Lords of the Fallen and all the Atlas games. So it never hurts to just advertise more.
And the last date that we have is that RPG Maker With will be launching on Nintendo Switch in the West on October 11th. It originally released in Japan on April 11th.
So this is the Switch's metaphor ReFantazio right here. Because they're not getting it.
So they
They'll
got
get
to
this
Make your
instead.
own.
Yeah, make your own. You're so mean.
I never get the idea of buying RPG Maker on consoles. Like, how can you like let people play your game like to that scale? I don't know. It just boggles my mind. Just buy it on PC, I guess.
I don't know. I'm not in that sphere.
Yeah, I mean, God bless those people who are in that sphere and actively in active development on this, but I was never in it.
Oh, there's PlayStation versions of this coming out next year.
Right. Yeah.
And that finally, we've hit every headline that we've had listed on our podcast document. That is not every trailer that has released over the last couple of weeks, but hopefully we've hit the highlights. So, kind of repeating myself at this point. Thanks to everyone on the site that has contributed, especially Adam, James, and Josh. Josh, especially on the site end, for getting all of this synthesized, all the new release dates, all the new media, all the art, all the trailers, all the links, all the back end stuff on the website, making sure that all these things all flow together and we don't have broken links. It's a lot of work, and this time of year never gets any easier. So we have it all up on the website. I know Adam's been updating his RPG date list. We've all been updating our personal lists. One more Nintendo Direct between us and Summer Freedom, maybe. We'll see.
Now there's gonna be Anime Expo still
Oh,
next
yeah.
month. Yeah, so there's be a few events next month. Not as much as this.
Yeah, then we go into
Yeah, but
TGS and Gamescom and all the rest. PAX
yeah,
West.
but the next big one obviously is the Nintendo Direct. Could be anytime this week, and probably we'll see.
It'll be announced like tomorrow, like before this podcast goes
Yeah,
public.
pretty watch out. Yeah.
But
But it's gonna be exciting though. I'm really interested to see what the Nintendo Direct has because there wasn't really that much Japanese presence at SGF. There was some here and there, but not a lot. So
I'm just hoping for Square Enix news. I don't know.
the Square Enix is like the big like missing one. They had stuff with like Life is Strange and some of their Western stuff, but not so much of their like the when on Dragon Quest Day, the Dragon Quest 3 HD 2D remake tease. Like where is that? I imagine that'll show up in the Nintendo Direct whenever that pops.
I would probably save that direct. I don't know. That's for me. Like, okay, hypothesis. Do you think they will show the new Switch yet?
No, they
said
already
they
said they
wouldn't.
won't. Yeah,
They
so
won't. Okay,
yeah.
damn.
So if you were betting money, then I'd take all your money right now.
Damn.
yeah.
Fucking bankrupt the day one.
But yeah, so we have the Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance review up on the site. We have the Monster Hunter Story Switch review up on the site. All of the various SGF previews are up on the site as well. Everything from Metaphor to Monster Hunter and all the rest. All the news is listed in order up on the site, from the Xbox Showcase, PC Gaming Show, all of them. You can find RPG site on most social media networks. Just search for RPG site and you should be able to find us. You can join our Discord at rpgsite.net. Hit the link at the top of the home screen, or go to discord.gg/rpgsite. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Tetracast. We'll likely, if possible, go into Elden Ring. None of us here on the podcast participants have had access to that quite yet. Maybe we'll try to get another contributor on the site on board, or otherwise we'll talk about it after release. We'll see how it plays out, because especially if there's a Nintendo Direct, whether or not that occurs will determine our scheduling. So any other closing thoughts on SGF, Josh, Adam, or Chow?
Probably not. I think we spent like 2
Um,
weeks covering it.
I'll say the same
there's
thing
a
I said last
handful.
week.
There's a handful of other previews that will come.
Uh-huh.
They're like the embargoes are like staggered.
There you
Okay.
go.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I'll say the same thing I said last week. Is like they need to find like a better way to organize all these events, because the way that they're doing it right now, I'm not a fan of it.
It's all like back to back.
It's very scattershot. It's very disorganized. Feels like.
And also, Alex Donaldson, our boss, actually wrote up a feature on VG247 about Summer Games Fest.
Mhm.
And it is a little bit annoying how like there's Summer Game Fest, in like this block that I talked about earlier. But then like Xbox is sort of off on their own, doing their own thing. Ubisoft is off on their own, doing their own thing, and a few others. How do I put this? They're like not technically part of Summer Games Fest, but they're like, oh, while everyone's in town, we have our own thing over here, like 20 minutes away.
E3 was kind of like that, but it wasn't 20 minutes
True.
away. It was EA is down the street, and they're not part of E3, but they're
Right.
down the street.
Right.
So
Just like quite literally, like it was kind of funny. Everyone was talking about like, oh, I have my Ubisoft appointment now, and of course they're not here; they're over there, and I gotta like work through LA traffic to get over there. And so even just from like not just from like the sitting at home like stream perspective, but just from like the actual event perspective, it's like, yeah, it's in the same city, but it could have been organized nicer, more collaborative.
Yeah.
But Adam, I hope you had a good time, and I hope James had a good time. I know you guys have already mentioned interest in going back next year. Whether or not it's a suitable replacement for E3, everyone will have their own opinion. But lots of cool stuff. I guess the most important thing is that we got so much cool stuff down the pike that we've been reminded of, got an extra look at, or surprised by, like Expedition 33. So we'll look forward to all of those as we start to fill out our 2025 planned playdate calendars. Until you hear from us next time, stay safe and take care. And we'll talk to y'all next week.